African ancestors who began the march of humankind in the womb of Mother Africa, we ask these ancestors to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of the African ancestors who began the march of humankind in the womb of Mother Africa and marched down the Nile, laying the foundations for human civilization and culture, we ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of these African ancestors who built their pyramids and their temples to their God concepts, to their principles, and to their moral values, who left us a legacy of architecture and monumental building unparalleled in the history of the world, we ask these ancestors who built the pyramids, who built the temples, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask these African ancestors who took this African culture and extended it throughout Africa, building the stone cities of Zimbabwe, building the empires of the Sudan, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, building the Swahili city-states along the east coast of Africa, and in Christian Africa, asking King Lalibela and giving him the courage to build the 12 churches of Lalibela from the ground down, monuments to the world. We ask these Africans who spread this culture to the Dogo and to the Akan and to the Yoruba and to the Bankango and to the Zulu. We ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of the Africans who opened up Africa, opened up the Nile Valley to other cultures and other peoples, and they came in and nurtured themselves on the African greatness. First coming in early were the ancient Hebrews, and they synthesized this culture and produced Judaism. Later coming in were the Christians, and they synthesized this culture and produced Christianity. Coming in were also the Greeks, who took the African culture, synthesized it, and produced Greek civilization. And then later, the Prophet Muhammad, and with the Arabs coming into the Nile Valley, they synthesized the culture and produced Islam. We ask these African ancestors, who as part of their legacy laid the foundations for Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Greek civilization, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask those African ancestors pulled out of Africa, taken to the hells of North America, South America, the Caribbean, maintaining the spirit of African humanity in their hearts and in their minds, and who left us this enormous legacy of struggle. We ask those Africans who resisted enslavement in the villages of Africa, who resisted enslavement in the shores of Africa, who resisted enslavement in those forts and dungeons, who resisted enslavement in the holds of those ships, who resisted enslavement when they arrived on these shores in the New World. We ask these Africans who ran into the highlands of northeast Brazil and established for 100 years the first free republic in the Americas, the Republic of Palmares, and their last great leader, Zumbi, who speared and sacrificed. We ask these Africans who replicated the Brazilian experience and went into the highlands of Jamaica and became the maroon-free communities. We ask these Africans who went into the backwoods of the Guyanas and Suriname and created free republic of the Suramaka and the Ajuka. We ask these Africans who went into the backwoods of Georgia and the swamps of Florida and moved with the Seminole Indians and resisted oppression. We ask these Africans who left us a legacy of struggle and resistance, the likes of which no one in the world has, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask these Africans who created and laid for us a foundation of struggle and resistance that was passed on generation after generation, that was passed on to Harriet Tubman, who fought her way out of enslavement and became a symbol of freedom for all of us. Similarly, Frederick Douglass and hundreds of thousands of others fought their way out of enslavement. We ask those Africans who went with Boukman Dessalines to create the greatest revolutionary experience in the history of the world, the Haitian Revolution, leaving us a legacy, the likes of which no one else has had. We ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future.
Speak truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth. When we lose our African connection, we lose our world connection. When we disconnect ourselves from Africa, we cease to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people begging for the entry into somebody else's house.
It's Sunday, August 24, 2014. Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Africa Forum, Running African. Good morning to you on the 107s, 107.1, all the way to 107.9. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Ankuja Sanab, life, prosperity, health to you. Indominado, Tenaistile. Jumbo. Good morning. Welcome to the forum. Welcome to the Africa space. My name is Kabu. Maat Kheru. My broadcast assistant this morning is Kayan Cole, and we go through until 10 o'clock. That's when the big A comes in for the Sunday sunshine. Reuniting the African family for development. That is the vision, our vision, to reunite the African family for development. Our mission includes blazing new paths towards Africa's rendezvous with destiny, bearing witness, demanding change, crafting an African-centered agenda for change and development. Part of that includes learning from the past, absorbing the spirit of human possibilities, honoring my own obligation to remember. So while we seek truth, we understand the need to honor our obligation to remember. So welcome to the Africa space. Welcome to the space that we have created. And it's a space that has also created itself. Because it is what it is. As we rememory, and for this process of remembering, of truth-seeking, of learning from the past, of understanding and absorbing the spirit of human possibility, of honoring our moral obligation to remember who we are, to remember where we're from, and to remember what we've done and what we can do. We're Africans not because we were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in us, as Mr. Higgins, Charles Higgins Jr. so well put it. Thank you very much for joining us on the 107s, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining us on the internet at irefm.net. And all the continents, thank you for joining us on the continent of Africa. Thank you very much for tuning in, for checking us out. Also on the continent of Europe, thank you. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the program. If you're listening to us in North America or any part of America, so the Americas, then thank you very much for joining us. Right here in the Caribbean, good morning to you. Good morning. And of course on the 107s. Alright, so we've wrapped up the physical tributes the public gatherings, to Mwalimo Marcus Mosiah Garvey for now, and that is, we're talking about the gatherings inclusive of the Liberty Hall program that we did from Liberty Hall, and that was the Black Think Tank, and of course the program on Sunday, the event on Sunday. Thank you very much to you who listened. Thank you very much to you who came out and made this tribute to Mwalimo Marcus Mosiah Garvey such a resounding success. Thank you very much. Started out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were going all the way to after 10 o'clock at night, 10:30. So for those who were listening on the 107s, you were able to turn over and move to the live stream if you weren't there before. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming out, for being a part of the day's event, and understanding that our physical presence in an African space, as a space that created itself last week Sunday, that we created, which in turn created itself last week Sunday, that understanding that gathering like that and coming into a space like that with an African-centered consciousness within our right African minds, understanding why we came, understanding why we gathered, understanding why we marched, why we paraded, understanding that there is an unfinished revolution, the unfinished revolution of Mwalimo Marcus Mosiah Garvey, knowing that even though this is a high point, a material manifestation point in terms of coming together like that, knowing that that is just a small part, a significant part, but a small part in the process for true liberation. So that we honor Mwalimo Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and we gather to do that, and we parade and we march in honoring our ancestors. But we also know very well and understand that in seeking truth, in honoring our moral obligation to remember, that we learn from the past, that past. Take the best of that past to determine where we go from here. And that is why we talk about absorbing the spirit of human possibility. Understanding that Mwalimo Marcus Mosiah Garvey achieved against all odds, and at a time and in a time when many of us would have shrunk from the intense scrutiny of the enemy among us and outside of us. That we use that as an example in terms of understanding and absorbing the spirit of human possibility as to what our obligations are now, what our responsibilities are in the fight for full freedom, in the struggle for full liberation, in the stance against oppression and any form of new slavery. So part of the process last week, and thank you very much for being there, part of that process, part of physically reuniting the African family is what it is. But we should also understand that it doesn't end there. We say for development, for liberation, for full free, which we have not yet achieved. You know, I've been listening to, and this is not just in relation to what happened on Sunday, but we've been hearing comments from even those among us, and especially those among us who would want us to get over it and to move on. Of course we're moving on. It is Sankofa. It is Sankofa. We're moving on. We're facing forward. But we're looking back and facing forward. Looking back and searching for the source. Looking back and remembering it. Looking back and remembering it. Looking back with the aim as we face forward to reintegrate the best of who we were and what we were and who we are into now, using it to go forward. But we won't get over it. We won't get over it until we have figured out what really happened, and until we have figured out a way to prevent it from happening again. One of the things that we have not done is that we haven't as a people figured out a way to prevent it. That is the enslavement of the African from happening again. And this might sound dramatic or a little over the top, but think about it. Because if we'd figured out a way to prevent it from happening again, how come IMF? How come World Bank? How come the Bretton Woods Group? How come? If we had figured out a way to prevent it, the enslavement of the African, from happening again, how come China, in an unequal partnership of sorts, how come? How come the EPA? How come the CBSI? How come AFRICOM? If we had figured out a way to prevent it, the enslavement of the African, from happening again, how come? So that we won't get over it until we have figured out what really happened, how it happened, and until we have figured out a way to prevent it from happening again. In that process, we will not trade off our identity. We will not trade off our intellectual identity in order to fit into anything. We will not trade off our African identity in order to fit in. One of the things that has happened to us as a people is that in order to determine whether or not we're capable, we have, and we continue to think that, and that's mental slavery, that we have to pass someone else's test. And I'm not just talking about the IMF, but it is one of that. It is one of that. Passing someone else's test in order to determine whether or not we're capable as a people. So until we have rid ourselves of that, we have not figured out a way to prevent it from happening again. Psychic violence happens every single day to the African. For our children and generations to come, if we do not figure out a way to prevent it from happening again. we're facing the same decay. And if you're born in a state of decay, then your inheritance is garbage. Teaching our children that excellence is the highest form of rebellion is a good way to go. Excellence in everything. We're going to be talking about Amilcar Cabral this morning. But he too talks about what needs to be done, which has not yet been done. All right, so I want to thank you very much for being at the tribute to Mwalimo Marcus Mosiah Garvey on Sunday. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much to all those who made this such a successful event. To the members of the IRFM staff, thank you so much. The Nyabingi drummers, the St. Anne Parish Council, the St. Anne Police, our sponsors, entertainers, cultural groups, vendors. Thank you so much to our guest speaker, Professor Oberte Shaka. By the way, Professor Oberte Shaka is joining me live in the studio this morning. Yes, he is. Joining me live in the studio this morning. And I know we've been tweeting and mentioning this on Facebook and on the social media. And some of you have privately sent me a note to say that, and you've said this in a good way, so thank you very much, because some of you indicate with a little smiley face, so I know it's not malicious, that I have a tendency to conduct interviews, and that you want this morning to conduct that interview. So we're going to give you enough time to call in. So Professor Oberte Shaka will be in the studio this morning. He was our guest speaker at the event last week. I want to say thanks to him and his wife, beautiful Pamela T. Shaka. I want to say also thank you to the Tivoli Marching Band, the National Interschools Brigade, Jackie Roots and the UNIA children. Thank you so much for a beautiful parade from downtown Oterias, from the Clock Tower, from Oterias Town Center, right here to Coconut Grove. Thank you so much. Also thanks to Paul and Tyrone Napier, who created the Marcus Garvey commemorative plaque that was presented to Professor Oberte Shaka at the Marcus Garvey celebrations. They're going to be joining me in the studio for a very quick chat this morning also. Very, very quick chat. Also coming up in the program this morning, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Feroze Manji. Of course, Dr. Manji is one of the editors of the book Claim No Easy Victory, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral. He joins me on the phone lines this morning to talk about the book launch. This will be happening in Canada. I want to say a very special thanks to His Worship the Mayor, Desmond Gilmore, National Interschools Brigade, as we said before, the Tivoli Marching Band, the UNIA Garvey Children, and Sister Jackie Roots, Mandingo, who's over there in the UK, Ras Jabalani, and by the way, also to my sister Ancobia, thank you very much. Ras Jabalani, Vice President of the Roots Foundation in Florida, Priest Dougie, President of the Roots Foundation, also in Florida. Also from Uganda, Kihura Nkuba, who joined us live from Uganda during the celebrations. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to those who turned up and performed. Ras Pada Aishan, Prince Tiba and the Sons of Thunder, Ras Ivai and the Nyabingi drummers, Pafaya and the Nyabingi drummers. My sister Amina Blackwood Meeks, thank you so much as usual. Nana Tendai Fodale, Gama Gloria, Dr. Bahu Imhotep Kimet Ba, to Member of Parliament Shahini Robinson, and to the performers, those who read the poetry of Mwalimo Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Roger Concrete Asphalt, Hanifa Saeed, the Mighty Jinsu, Rastakura, Cherry Natural, Muta Baruka, Neto Meeks, Nomads, Nadiverta, Bushman, Denise Isis Miller. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Isis, for doing a great job way into the night. Thanks to La Cadco Dance Ensemble and to Lontonet Steins in particular. Also to the St. Anne Police, Advanced Precision Security, and to, of course, Dr. Crooks. Did a yeoman job, Medivac team on the ground here at IRI FM. Thank you so much, Dr. Crooks. And to the team here at IRI FM who worked throughout the month of July, because we had quite a few events and activities and programming throughout the month of July, and then at Liberty Hall, and then physically again on the ground here last Sunday. And especially for those for the last Sunday, our team, Joy Morgan, Kishima Francis, Samantha Mitu, Kayan Cole, Georgetta Blake, Claudine Clark, Shanna Evans, Mark Hudson, Stephanie Hamilton, Nikisha Henry, Monique Price, Romaine Murray, Carol Campbell, Shireen Mace, Jacqueline Johnson, DJ Bryan, Shane Clark, Kenyatta Miller, Nicholas Evans, Nicholas Francis, Errington Roberts, Warren Bertram, Joe Mignard, Emric Johnson, Ricardo Powell, Jody Ann Dawkins, and that's a big IRFM team who worked, right? Dwight Fraser, Garfield Stanley, Peter Bent, Kim Day, Dwight Baldwin, Big A, Digital Chris, Wilbert Wisdom, Shane Gahigan, Paul Phillips. So sometimes, and I'm reading this and I'm saying, sometimes when we present these events and we all turn up and have a good time, and for those who could listen, who can hear and stream, listen to the live and watch a live stream and so on the internet, what misses many of us, including some of us who are on the front line, is the work that goes into making that possible. And that very long list I just read are members of staff who directly worked on the project, who was there on the day, on the ground, and made it what it was, made it what it sounded like. And that's a very, very, very big team when you think about it. Thanks also to our managing director, Debbie Ann DeWar, and also to Chedi and the team who made this possible. All right, thanks to our sponsors, the Lexus Pharmacy, Island Eyewear, Monique College, iVest Rose Prep and Family Care, Osuja Records, Label and Juice Master, Graham's Wholesale, Contractors Music Marketing, Couple Sauce Susie, Adwa Nutrition for Life, SM Jalil and Beverages, and we mentioned Dr. Crooks Medical Services, Medivac, Reflections Restaurant. Thank you so much to all of you who made last week, Sunday, a resounding success. Thank you very much.
Hide nothing from the masses of the people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, failures. Claim no easy victory. When we lose our African connection, we lose our world connection. When we disconnect ourselves from Africa, we cease to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people, begging for the entry into somebody else's house. One day we turn our heads.
Bit of remembering and understanding our obligations. Haiti, the only country in the world where enslaved Africans liberated themselves by overthrowing their enslavers. A powerful symbol of resistance, Haiti. A beacon of hope to end slavery everywhere. Boy Cayman, August 14, 1791. Manbo Fatiman, Manbo Cecile Fatiman, and we must know that name and understand that name because she called them together, and she selected Bookman Dutty as a priest to lead the proceedings, to lead the uprising. August 14, 1791, they met in Boy-Caiman to set the date. August 21, 1791, for the uprising. Ceremony led by Bookman Dutty under the guardianship of Mambo Cecile Fatiman.
So today, my brothers in Haiti still pay the price.
Looking back at the legacy of Boy-Caiman, facing forward, looking back. They did it in Haiti and are being punished, have been punished ever since. Part of what we have done as a people here in Jamaica is that many Jamaicans, and we say Jamaicans now without even qualifying African Jamaicans, but many Jamaicans, not necessarily in their conscious minds, in their conscious African minds, are now looking on Haiti as a country of devious wizards and witches. And I watched a program the other day, and heard a minister of religion talk about the oppression of Haiti by Western economic, political forces as being deserving because there's a lot of witchcraft in Haiti. They have certainly done a number on us, that we look at each other with distrust, that we talk about witchcraft in Haiti, not understanding that the center of witchcraft in the world is Europe and possibly the United Kingdom. That we do not understand that. We kill ourselves and kill each other to get to the Great Britain. And then we turn our noses up at Haiti and talk about witchcraft in Haiti. And our pastors, our priests, religious leaders in Jamaica spew this nonsense. We should do like France, and if anything is said about witchcraft and negativity about Haiti, we should make that a crime, and you should be jailed for it, as they make anti-Semitism a crime in France. I think that's where we need to go. It's going to be difficult with the current crop of leaders. But we should, when it is said in our presence, we must mash down that lie by any means necessary. Let's mash down that lie. I'm tired of it, actually. Tired of religious leaders spewing the nastiness of Pat Buchanan and the others who would continue to keep their boots on the necks of Haiti, talking about it is deserving because of witchcraft. And that, of course, is coming from the very same August 14 meeting. You know that. So we're celebrating the revolution this morning, celebrating the liberation this morning, celebrating Haiti. We know the condition that Haiti is in, but we're celebrating the spirit of liberation and the spirit of freedom and the spirit of Bookman Dutty. Celebrating the spirit of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And today, is the exact date, the exact 77th anniversary, and this is not about Haiti now, but the Ethiopian World Federation is connected. It was formed August 25, 1937, 77 years ago. The preamble read, "We the black people of the world, in order to effect unity, solidarity, liberty, freedom and self-determination, to secure justice and maintain the integrity of Ethiopia, which is our divine heritage." And this was the preamble from the Ethiopian World Federation 77 years ago. To effect unity, solidarity, liberty, freedom and self-determination. to secure justice and maintain the integrity of Ethiopia, which is our divine heritage. In a little while, I'll be joined in the studio by our very special guest, Professor Oberte Shaka. And as you recall, he was our special guest speaker last week Sunday right here on the ground. I've been talking with Professor Oberte Shaka on the phone lines since July, and ever since he agreed to come in to Jamaica to be our special guest for the Mwalimo Marcus Mosaic Garvey tribute. And so we've had many conversations with him. Also, he spoke here on Sunday. This was broadcast live on the internet. Giving you a chance this morning to be part of the conversation, and so that we're going to be opening the phone lines from very early in the conversation, because we've been getting those requests from you, so you can speak directly with Professor Oberte Shaka. So let me give you the numbers as of now. 974-5079, 974-5043, 974-5051, and toll free 1-888-991-4152. You can also send me a message on Facebook. You can send me a message on Facebook. Kabu Maat Kheru Williams. Kabu Maat Kheru Williams. That's where you'll find me on Facebook. Kabu is K-A-B-U. K-A-B-U. Maat, M-A-A-T, and Kheru, K-H-E-R-U. I'm getting it spelled all kinds of ways. So it's Kabu, K-A-B-U, Maat, M-A-A-T, Kheru, K-H-E-R-U, Williams. And on Twitter, you can also send your questions via Twitter. And you can do this at Kabu Maat Kheru. At Kabu Maat Kheru. So that little at sign, Kabu, K-A-B-U, Maat, M-A-A-T, Kheru, K-H-E-R-U. Of course, you can also call in. Now, my email address still has a Babylon name, so you can email me at andrea.williams@iriafm.net. andrea.williams@iriafm.net. These are some of the places where you can send in your questions this morning. Barring that, you can always give us a call. 974-5079, 974-5051, 5043, or 1-888-991-4152. That is as soon as Professor Oberte Shaka joins us, and he'll be joining us at 7 o'clock. We'll take your calls very soon after that. Also, later on in the program, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Feroze Manji, and he'll be talking to us about the book, Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral. The book edited by Feroze Manji himself and Bill Fletcher Jr. Hey, as we talk about Amilcar Cabral, the Commission of Inquiry into the assassination of our brother, Dr. Walter Rodney, will resume on the 25th, which is tomorrow, isn't it? But I thought it was Wednesday. In any case, it's resuming next week, and we'll keep you informed. The Commission of Inquiry is continuing into the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney. That commission is taking place in Guyana. Yeah, we missed it earlier to our sponsors, Tingles Distributors, Nitro. Thank you very much, Nitro, for coming out last week and for helping to create our VIP backstage area. Thank you very much. And at Alton Buddle on Twitter is asking, is witchcraft worse than guns and bullets? Good question, my brother, good question.
Running African, reuniting the African family for development.
boat that leads to the USA. You're paying for the Africanness you still keep. You're paying, bookman is not asleep. You gave us Haiti the strength to fight. Black people in the Caribbean, I say unite. Break the chains that keep us apart. Haiti suffers because it made a start. 80-80, you have the will. 80-80, Africa calls you still. Too black, too strong, you have to pay. Blacker than night, never seen the day. But too black is always the reason for your pain. But your fight for freedom will not be in vain. You're going and no one seems to care. 80 now, but neighbors beware. The blood, sweat and tears that is shed today will be a guide for Africans along the way. Cuba beware. Jamaica beware. Trinidad beware. Grenada beware. Caribbean beware, beware, beware. Care no fear. Care no fear. Caribbean beware, beware, beware. Break the chains that keep us apart. Haiti suffers because it made us start. But too black is no reason for pain. The blood for freedom will always stain. 80-80, you have the will. 80-80, Africa calls you still. Caribbean leaders, what are you going to do? Today it's 80, tomorrow it's you. Today it's 80, tomorrow it's you.
Haïti ou pralé, et personne pas mêlé. C'est Haïti Kounia, mes voisins, restez sous Pingano. Sans, sieur, ak l'âme n'a pas crié aujourd'hui, a toujours guidé l'Afrique africain. Cuba, restez sous Pingao. Jamaïque, restez sous Pingao. Trinidad, restez sous Pingao. Grenade, restez sous Pingao. Caraïbes, restez sous Pingan. Caraïbes, restez sous Pingan. Cassez chien, capé séparé nous. Haïti, quoi peut souffrir. Peut-être nous c'est premier. Mais trop loin, pas raison pour nous souffrir. Max sans liberté a toujours été là. Haïti ou bien volonté. Haïti, l'Afrique a relé ou toujours. Ni des Caraïbes, ça n'a pas fait. Je dis à c'est Haïti, demain c'est nous-mêmes. Je dis à c'est Haïti, demain c'est nous-mêmes. Je dis à c'est Haïti, demain c'est nous-mêmes. Demain c'est nous-mêmes. Demain c'est nous-mêmes.
Nothing from the masses of the people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, fairs. Claim no easy victory. They are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, fairs. Claim no easy victory.
As we remember and recall one of the greatest revolutions of all time, 14th of August 1791, and today we celebrate the spirit of liberation. My friend Bert Samuels, Pan-African attorney at law. Good morning to you, Bert. Send me a note. He says, "Obey me, but do not enslave me. We pardon those who enslaved us, who committed crimes against humanity. At the same time, wish doom on Haiti for our religious practices."
Hide nothing from the masses of the people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, failures. Claim no easy victory.
Talking about claim no easy victory, is going to be joined on the phone lines later on this morning by Ferozi Manji. Ferozi Manji, a Kenyan with more than 40 years experience in international development, health and human rights, the director of the Pan-Africanism Baraza for ThoughtWorks. He joined ThoughtWorks in April 2014. He was formerly the head of the Documentation, Information and Communication Center of the Pan-African Institution, Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa. And it's based in Dakar. He's going to be talking to us about Claim No Easy Victories, the launch of the book. Claim No Easy Victories, the legacy of Amilcar Cabral, edited by himself, Rose Manji, and Bill Fletcher Jr. So we'll hear from him later on. In the meantime, quick break and we'll be right back. Now, 2 minutes after 7 o'clock, you're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African. In this segment of the program, we're going to be speaking with my very, very, very special guest, who is our guest, actually. He's now live in the studio talking about Professor Oberte Shaka right after this. Professor Oberte Shaka live in the studio with us. Well, we've been telling you a lot about Professor Oberte Shaka since July, and have been reading his bio, also telling you a little bit about the work that he's done. Not enough time at any time to talk about the body of work from Professor Oberte Shaka. We'll hear from him directly this morning. Activist, scholar, renowned public speaker, and a leader, organizer, visionary, exceptional influence, who addresses audiences in the United States and Britain, in France, in Africa, and of course in the Caribbean. For over 38 years, Dr. T. Shaka was a professor at San Francisco State University, where he's now Professor Emeritus. Dr. T. Shaka spoke at the Million Man March, and you would have heard that because we carried a clip of that just a few weeks ago, right here in this space, the address to the Million Man March. Well, he also spoke right here at IRFM at our tribute to Mwalimo Marcus Messiah Garvey just last Sunday. And we are still, Professor Oberte Shaka, still getting calls, still getting messages, still getting questions from persons about how they can get that speech, about how that speech impacted them. Good morning again, Professor. Welcome to the studio this time.
Glad to be here, Sister Kabu, and I really enjoyed the Marcus Garvey 100th Memorial Commemoration. It was a real good experience for me. Beautiful people who turned out, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you so much, Professor, for coming in. We have been talking to you on the telephones from the United States before you came in, and one of the things that has happened this morning is that so many of our listeners have written in to say, do not hog the microphone, but give them a chance to ask you questions. So we're going to be opening the phone lines shortly. We just tell our listeners that. But we want to lay the groundwork a little bit, to talk a little bit about your work. And first, about your work as a civil rights activist, because we are fascinated by that here in Jamaica, what you did in Philadelphia and how you led that struggle for liberation, and especially economic liberation in Philadelphia. How did you get involved, and you must have been pretty young at that age, to be a civil rights activist? How did you get to be so African-centered?
It was the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement, and my activism began in part because there were things going on in the world. There was the Cuban Revolution, and my father was a very conscious African, and he came out of Orange, Texas, and he was fighting the Ku Klux Klan when he was 12 years old, beating up Klansmen who were 18 and 19 years old, and refused to fight in World War II because he said he wouldn't kill Germans because they didn't have a Southern accent. They hadn't lynched his people. He wouldn't kill Japanese because they looked like him. But if he got a chance and they gave him an N1 rifle, he'd kill a whole lot of racist whites. So he got a 4F, which meant that he was excluded from the military, and we got a good father. So partially, though he was a radical, I didn't get his message until after I got in the movement. I got his message of fighting against racism physically, but I didn't understand his politics until I got engaged in the movement. The person that got me engaged was a black woman. Her name was Ella Hill Hutch, and she was my mother's best friend. She was the mother of the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement, one of the two founders of the Congress of Racial Equality Corps, which I joined. And she worked at the same place my father worked. My father was a longshoreman. He would unload and unload ships in San Francisco. She was a secretary in the Longshoremen's Union. And she also became the first black woman elected to the Board of Supervisors, which would be your city government in San Francisco. So the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement was the largest of the northern movements. It was the most complex of all the movements because San Francisco and New York are the most complex areas to organize in. You have the most complex ethnic mix. We had whites, blacks, but then you had Chicanos, you had Asians, you had a large Japanese American community that had been incarcerated in concentration camps during World War II that had lived in the community that we ended up organizing in the Fillmore. And the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement engaged all those communities, organized them, and led them. And so that's really the only movement that did that at that time. The main issue in San Francisco was, and in the North, was that blacks were denied jobs. At the end of World War II, there was literally no work for black people once the war industries had closed down. So blacks were largely unemployed. In the South, the issue for Martin Luther King and the movement in the South, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was the denial of the right to vote, and it was segregation in all areas of life. So that's what they fought. So we fought economic apartheid in the North, and they fought political apartheid in the South. The Southern movement is what gave birth to the Northern movement, because that's where the bulk of our people are, and that's where the most serious oppression was. So the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement is really crucial because we defeated the entire economic power structure of San Francisco, of the Bay Area, and of the state of California, the largest state in the United States, because the jobs we opened up in San Francisco, they translated the Bay Area in many cases throughout the state of California. So in that sense, we improved the economic empowerment of black people because it enabled them to gain jobs that would stabilize their families. This movement was also a movement that gave birth to the free speech movement. This is a key thing about the movements in the United States, that we're strategically located. As Jamaica is, as Africa is, we have the capacity to create a chain reaction in the world. If we have a movement in the States, the chances are that movement will spread around the world. The Garvey movement was a case in point. The Civil Rights movement, the Black Power movement, the Afrocentric movement, the same in Jamaica with reggae, with the consciousness that has come out of Jamaica. In Jamaica, the big influence of Kool Herc and others on hip-hop, for example. So there's always been this interplay. But what we weren't conscious of in the movement was that our movement was radicalizing other sectors of the society. Over time, we became conscious of that. And one sector that we radicalized were white students. And so we had many white students that we pulled from UC Berkeley, which is America's best university. More Nobel Prize winners are produced from there than any university in the United States. And these were white upper-class and middle-class students who got introduced into the struggle through being our shock troops. So they got arrested for a job campaign, hotel and restaurant industry, Auto Row, and the Bank of America, which was the largest campaign for jobs in the North or in the country in the civil rights movement. I led that. The Bank of America was the largest bank in the world and hired no blacks, no people of color. So after a year of them being arrested in these campaigns, they were radicalized, went back to UC Berkeley, and started what was called the free speech movement, where students demanded control of the university so that they could express their own ideas. They picked up our political culture, because African American culture and African culture, African Caribbean culture, is democratic and is generally consensus based. That's how we ran things. So they went back to UC Berkeley with the democratic culture and turned that university upside down, and then that led to a free speech movement across the United States. In 1968, it led to a student movement in France that nearly overthrew the French government. So this movement was strategic in that sense. Some of the students that got arrested in the San Francisco civil rights movement conceived of the idea while they were being arrested of forming an experimental college at San Francisco State University. And this experimental college funded Amiri Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, and many others. This was the forerunner for the Black Studies Department. The best Panther, many of us consider to be the best Panther, came out of San Francisco Corps. His name was D.C., Donald Cox. He ended up being field marshal for the Black Panther Party. He was my public relations chair, and he was probably the best disciplined, smartest of all the Panthers at the national level. He was a problem solver. The FBI charged him with the crime he didn't commit. He ended up in exile, died in France about a year ago. So the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement was a mother movement, and the key accomplishments were that this was just not true of San Francisco, it's true of the movement in general. Our members did not look for personal enrichment. The jobs we gained, not a single one of us took one of those jobs. It was an unspoken rule. Now, that's a high level of love that we didn't have to sit down and say, we're not taking these jobs. It was just unspoken. And so that meant that we were buyout proof. That meant that we weren't looking for anything for ourselves. So me, as a result of that, I adopted a warrior code, which is I don't profit from any movement I lead. I don't take any money or anything else. That means you don't have any control over me. That means I follow only one thing. That's the truth. Even if my own people tell me to do wrong, I ain't doing it. You know what I mean?
But that's interesting, and quite a few points I want to pick up on, and that also, because I think it's a crux of the matter for many of us in the liberation movement, because the liberation movement continues. What happened to the movement, though? We're talking about the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement, talking about the organizing that went on, the extent to which persons came together and what was achieved. But would you, I know I'm reading your book, The Integration Trap, The Generation Gap, and I've been listening to people like Nelson Mandela, like Deo, our own Caribbean singer, who marched with Martin Luther King, and some of the elders who have talked about, Harry Belafonte I'm talking about, who have talked about being part of a struggle, but somehow are now reflecting, and we heard Harry Belafonte, for example, talk about his regret at not bridging the gap between himself and his children in terms of the movement. What would you say happened, or has anything happened? Is the generation now as conscious as ever about the need for the continuation of this liberation struggle, or are we on a whole different plane?
Yeah, I would stress two things. One is that the movements that were really effective, or leaders that were, or individuals in movements that were, underwent what I discussed at the Marcus Garvey commemoration. They underwent a reconstruction of the mind, or as Amilcar Cabral described it, a reconversion of the mind, or a conversion of the mind. That is, they returned to their African roots and underwent deep psychological, mental, political transformation. Malcolm underwent that. To the extent that movements and leaders did not, that contributed more to their failure than anything else. Cabral, as I was interested in you referring to an interview you're going to do pretty soon today on Amilcar Cabral, he's the greatest leader in the 20th century because he mastered the theory of his history, but he underwent an internal transformation himself. He had been an assimilated Cape Verdean who thought he was Portuguese. And in the course of his education in Portugal as an agronomy student, he underwent conversion. He decided to be African. It sounds silly, someone living in Africa deciding to be Africa, but then we understand. Many of us are mental Europeans, and a lot of us don't even know it. And so I underwent an awakening in the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement. Many others did. And it was a decision to become African. It was a conversion. It was a realization that I had been miseducated in Western education, which usually happens with people who undergo college education. They get assimilated to assume identities not their own, white identities. And in my case, I had undergone political assimilation. Cabral had undergone mental assimilation to the point that he thought he was white. Malcolm had also. Garvey had undergone political assimilation where he identified with the British Empire. And so Cabral makes the point that in order for us to undergo an awakening, two things have to happen. You have to return to your ancient African past, and you have to return to the popular culture of your people. That's for assimilated people. For people, Cabral said that the everyday people did not have to undergo mental conversion because they created the popular culture. But for us in the Western Hemisphere, many of our people who have not been miseducated through universities have been miseducated through the systems of colonialism and enslavement. And we've been taught to hate ourselves. And the bottom line is we've been cut off from the history of Africa. So the average everyday Jamaican or the average everyday black person in the United States or the Caribbean needs to undergo mental conversion to the extent that we need to understand our ancient African history and past and recover a sense of historical memory, which enables us to recover a sense of love. So part of what happened for some of us is we underwent that conversion. Many groups like the Black Panther Party, for example, that were very, very effective in organizing street people. That was a very, very good thing. And the same thing with the Nation of Islam. They didn't have a conversion process for people who came in with gangster mentalities. And that was because the leadership itself had not completed that conversion. The primary head of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, had started that conversion process and then was put in prison for killing a policeman, which he probably didn't do, eventually freed. But because of the lack of completion among the leadership, it didn't happen among most of the membership. That was Asante Shakur's critique. Now, in reference to the comment by Harry Belafonte, first of all, Harry Belafonte is one of the great people among our people in the world. He's given up a tremendous amount for the movement, a lot of financing and a lot of support. His point, which is one that I deal with in the book, The Integration Trap, Generation Gap Caused by Choice Between Two Cultures, the counterintelligence program in the 60s had an aim. That was the government program that killed Malcolm, that killed King. They ran 3 of those against me, 3 attempts to kill me, denial of a teaching credential, which I decided not to fight, and tried to deny me tenure at San Francisco State, which I fought. I never lose a battle. And I only decided not to fight the teaching credential thing because the Spirit told me not to. I didn't know why. I always follow the Spirit. That was because they had a job for me at San Francisco State. They didn't want me to teach in the public school. I found that out later. But what Harry Belafonte was referring to is, since the late 60s, powerful forces have hit the African world. They have hit the Caribbean, they have hit the United States, they've hit Africa. And these have come in the form of globalization. In the United States, manufacturing jobs leaving the country. In Jamaica, the IMF, or as I referred to in the speech, the International Misery Fund, that they call the Monetary Fund. No monetary stuff seems to get to the poor people who need it. It's a way of giving you money to put you under their control and transfer their resources from your country to their country, under their control, under the name of privatization. They always have these fancy names, structural adjustment. They should call it structural lynching. They're coming in to lynch your country. They did that to Africa. So the thing is, these forces have eroded life for African people. In Africa, you had independence leaders like Nkrumah, Nyerere, Cabral. Nkrumah and Nyerere, free education, free medical care. I worked in the Ujamaa villages in Tanzania in 1973 with a group of people from the Pan-African Peoples Organization that I'm a part of for 3 months. And you could see how these villages were being built, free medicine, free education, and they were moving to move to a level of industrialization. But the point is, when the IMF comes in, they rule these programs. If you want to get aid, you need to end free education. You need to end free medical care. So what they did is erode the life of the average person. And in the United States, with the jobs leaving the country, then what happened is this weakened the family, because black men who had good paying industrial jobs, they represented 20% of the industrial workforce when we're only 10% of the country, they could support a family. When those jobs left, it was McDonald's and Burger King. There's a blues song that says, "Baby, the computer took my job." High-tech jobs are there, but the low-tech jobs don't pay anymore. And so what happens is then this affects the lifestyle of the youth, not only of adults. And what happens is a couple of generations of youth in the States who don't have a father that they see, and where there aren't viable jobs for them. And so what happens is these forces, along with the counterintelligence program that killed off good leadership, along with bringing in black mayors, which blacks wanted. We wanted black mayors. But the Ford Foundation worked a program where they funded candidates for mayor who had no experience in political struggle. So Carl Stokes was the first black person elected in Cleveland. And whereas Bobby Seale had run for mayor in Oakland, nearly won, he didn't run the second time, and a mayor, Lionel Wilson, was elected, and Lionel Wilson was an ex-judge whose only experience for black people was locking black people up. So what you ended up having is the system trying and successfully moving to replace militant leadership with moderate leadership, and many blacks having a fear as a result of the murder of many of our leaders and the killing off of many movements like the Black Panther Party, a fear of militancy, so they hoped that their dreams and ambitions would be fulfilled through the system. The point is, these forces that hit us have put our people in a position globally of choosing between two cultures. We haven't been conscious of it, but we have seen with the youth especially, there has been a weakening of the transmission belt of our culture. When families are weakened, then what ends up happening is other groups begin to supplant them. So peer groups in the States are having more influence often than families. We have the first unchurched generation of black youth in the States. Now the church, I'm not a Christian, but the church does carry a lot of African traditions and a lot of African values, and what you're having is a sizable number of young girls who do not have any kind of connection with spirituality. It's not just the church, but spirituality. And this generation gap has emerged where, with the erosion of the standard of living for young people, since they see not very much of a future in the job market, they often see themselves in prison, even though there are more black youth in college than in prison in the United States. They then begin to have questions about elders. And so there's a growing disrespect for elders, and among elders, too many elders who see their children as theirs, but no longer see the children as the community's children. Because before, the community raised our children. But when drugs came into the black community, it drove a wedge between young and old, and as a result, many elders have come to fear their youth. Even though most youth are not engaged in gangbanging, most youth are not engaged in violence, some are the victims of violence. So the key point is that we're at a crossroads, the African world, because this is happening across the world, weakening of extended family system. You and I were talking about how that's been weakened here in Jamaica.
And hold that point. We're going to take a quick break, come back and pick up from there. We're speaking with Professor Oberte Shaka, and I'll try and open the telephone lines. I did promise that I'll do that around 7:30, but we'll do that as soon as we possibly can. Right after this. 7:31, you're inside of the Africa Forum, Running Africa, and my very, very special guest in the studio this morning is Professor Oberte Shaka, and we're going to be opening the phone lines to take your telephone calls shortly, but just to get through one or two other issues. We want to pick up Professor Oberte Shaka from where you left off just now, talking about the weakening of the family. You made reference to Jamaica, and you were talking particularly of what was going on in the United States, reflected here on the ground in Jamaica, to be frank. But do you see this weakening of the family as a part of what you talk about, the forces that are aligned against the African family? Are these insurmountable forces, or how do we push back against these forces and beat them?
Good question, because I'm not a woe is me person, but I'm a person that wants to analyze what's going on the ground as the problem and then come up with the solution. So these forces have hit us heavily, and I want to stress that the most powerful forces that have hit us have been corporate forces, because if you look at the International Misery Fund or Monetary Fund, World Bank, or if you look at the forces that have taken jobs out of the country, these are corporations, and they run the country, they run the world. Corporate forces. And so part of the problem is that I was getting to is that these forces, by increasing sufferation or misery, have created cultural choices, unintended. I don't think that the corporations planned a lot of these. The CIA planned to put drugs in black communities, and they planned to put a culture in communities, and that occurred here through the rivalries of the parties around political issues, because Manley was viewed as someone who was trying to serve the people, and the U.S. government doesn't like any government that serves the people. They like governments that serve the rich, which means them, and then they'll cream off a little bit for the leaders of those countries. So the forces that hit Jamaica, in terms of the drug epidemic, the gun violence, that was all a part of trying to tame Jamaica, make Jamaica look like they were ungovernable under a socialist government, and they could bring you under tow. In the United States, the drugs that hit black communities was designed to put out the light of the freedom movement and to take the youth out of the movement. Superfly, the movie, was a psychological part of it, where you have a guy sniffing coke out of an ankh, which is a symbol of life, eternal life. So these forces, in the case of drugs, they were designed to put in a mad culture. But in the case of the corporate forces, I don't think they were looking at what that would do to the culture. So what's happened in the States and across the African world is our people have been put in a position unwittingly of choosing between corporate values and the values that our people have held dear, between extended family community values and weakened extended families or no extended families. Choosing between a family culture and, in the States, no family. A lot of people feel comfortable being single, even though they'd rather not be single. There are a lot of advantages in that you don't have anybody that you have to work out compromises with in a loving relationship. You can just do it on your own. And for men, since there's such a shortage of good men, that is, men who have jobs, that's not necessarily a good man, but that's what women are looking for.
It's also something I noticed in the UK a few years ago, and when I saw it, when I recognized it at first, it shocked me coming from Jamaica, which was much more different. The extent to which the state provided for single mothers at the expense, I would say, of the fathers, and I thought, just looking on that welfare system, it's interesting. It's almost as if you're encouraging young, poor and mainly black women to continue to have children. You'll house them, but they'll always be below the poverty line.
Yeah, and the state ends up being the mother and the father and setting the standards for how children are raised. And so in the States, and I'm sure it's true in the UK, any kind of parental discipline gets treated as abuse. And so what you have also in a shift in cultures is a growing number of young people who are raising children who think that permissiveness is a good way to raise a child, meaning let the child do whatever they want to do. And it's true, slavery, I think, introduced some behavior with us in terms of discipline that wasn't good, in terms of over physical discipline, over physical punishment. But to go to the other extreme is just as bad. So these are cultural choices. We're not conscious of the choices. In this case, you're under a welfare system. This is the condition for you getting money, you know, and it's having more babies, and it's not having a man in the house. Now, with Bill Clinton, who was one of the worst presidents for black people, he ended welfare. And so you have black women in the States and poor women. Most people on welfare are white, poor white women, only having 5 years where they get any state support. After that, if they don't have a job, they're homeless. So these are part of the thing. So as far as solutions, if these forces have led some of us to step out of our culture, if some of our youth aren't listening to their adults, have no respect for them, think that there's nothing that they can pass on to them, if some of our adults are reaching a point where they either think that the only child they're concerned about is their own by birth, or they're afraid to discipline or to take an interest in anyone else's child, these are cultural shifts. It should be clear that the answer here is we have to draw from the best of our culture, which is the culture recreated by Africans in the Western Hemisphere, and it's the popular culture of Africa. And we also have to draw from the best of ancient African culture. That's where the serious awakening occurs. So this is the key thing. There will be no political change, no economic change, no social change in terms of the family unless this is linked to the culture, because the culture is what gives people their sense of being. It's your way of life. It's your design for living. And so our culture is spirit-based all over the world. Call it whatever you want. If you call yourself a Christian or a Muslim or a traditional African, what binds you more than anything is spirit. This belief that God is an infinite force outside of space, outside of time. God is nowhere and everywhere at the same time. We're spirit-based people. You lose that, you lose your humanity. Family. This notion of extended family. I know here in Jamaica and the Caribbean, there is a strong undercurrent of polygamy. It's unofficial, but men have them a variety of women. That is a continuation of African traditions, but frowned on. So people have what they call their outside wife. And very often, though, in the Caribbean, that woman who they're married to legally knows who that outside wife is. Sometimes they're hidden, but often the man is bringing those children home. You know what I mean? But the point is, family is, next to spirit, the most important thing in African culture and in new African culture. So here in the Caribbean, we have reworked those principles in this environment. You're much more traditional African when it comes to family than we are, you know, in that polygamy didn't sustain itself as well in the States as it did here. So we have to revisit, we have to look at this culture, the patois, the language that everyday people here speak. That's African with English mixed in, and it's beautiful. My wife was given the term for a notebook, And, I've run out of papers. So I was telling the driver I needed a notebook. Well, I asked her, what did that mean? It meant that this is for people who have forgot something. And I said, that's a good description because our culture's oral. So we like to stress memory, over what's written. And when we write, we like to write the way we speak because it's the orality. Most of our people who were enslaved, we didn't come out of written systems. We came out of oral systems, but we remembered everything. And that made it very hard to take the African out of us. That's what we often miss because it wasn't just in a book. It was in our souls. It was in our heart. So I think that the return to the best of this culture that we have recreated in the Caribbean and South America, and you were talking about Haiti. Haiti is the strongest country in terms of culture. Culturally, they're the strongest people in the Western Hemisphere. I'm not going to say that I'm taking a backseat because I come from the United States. Now, I got to acknowledge it. They're the only people, as you noted, in the world that freed themselves from enslavement, and it was because of the strength of their culture. Voodoo, what we like to put down as black magic. Voodoo just means God. It's the African religions mixed with Indian religion. Petro rights, because the Indians were fierce fighters. They mixed that up. Desalane came out of that. More than Toussaint. He came out of that. And Jacob Carruthers' book on the Irritated Genie, which is one of the two best books on the Haitian Revolution, Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. But in many ways, Jake's is an improvement because he shows that resistance that led to the Haitian Revolution came from Maroon resistance traditions, which has recreated African communities, as you had here with Cujo and others, that took Africa and reapplied it to the Americas and gave us the sense of invincibility, that if you die, you will go back to Ifa, and you will join your ancestors. And if you live, you'll be free right here on Haitian soil. So it's this culture that we have recreated that we have to visit. And I argue that what we need now, as we had in the 60s, we had an Afrocentric, in the 80s and 90s, an Afrocentric cultural renaissance. We reclaimed Kemet as black. We succeeded in that. I led that within the National Black United Front. Dr. Jacob Carruthers, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, Obinga, many others were intellectual leaders of this. My good friend, Dr. Asa Hilliard, who's passed on, Leonard Jeffries, and others. What we need now is, I think, we need an African American, and by that I mean the Americas, Africans in the Americas, cultural renaissance. Technically, we need a new African cultural renaissance. Can't use that term right now because most of us wouldn't know what you mean, but we're referring to this culture that we have here that's more African than anything else, and revisiting it and reclaiming it. And most of everyday Jamaicans don't know that language they're speaking is African. They don't understand that their family relationships are basically African. They don't understand that the spirit that they worship up inside the Christian church is African. And so what we have to do is reclaim the best of these traditions and link them to economic empowerment, link them to education, link them to better health care, link them to revitalizing our family. But we need a new African or African American cultural renaissance. And in the States, this needs to be one that bridges the generational divide. We need to bring together the best of the hip-hop generation, particularly those who are the founders and those who are carrying out real hip-hop, with the best of the leaders and activists and thinkers and artists who come out of the movements of the 60s. And we need to do that to bridge and raise up because Renaissance means renewal, a renewal of our culture, which is a renewal of our peoplehood. Africa needs the same thing.
I'm jumping straight to the final question I'm going to ask before I throw it to our listeners on the telephone lines and so on. And that is to look at the African male-female relationship, because this also, I think, is critical to this new African Renaissance that we're talking about. But it's also something that you have spent some time and some serious study on looking at. And you told us this on the phone a few weeks ago, that you've looked at the twin concept of a male and female, and let's talk about that within our own particular context here in Jamaica and say in the African diaspora.
That's a real good question, because at the heart of any real radical transformation in society where you can really eliminate oppression, then basically all society is made up of is males and females. So the question is, what's their relationship? One of the real problems with the revolutions that have supposedly come out of Europe, the Russian Revolution, and even the Chinese Revolution, is that they have not focused enough on the human dimension. Particularly the Russians, they focused on the economy, or Marx. He talked about changing the relationship to how you work and who controlled the factory and all this kind of stuff, which is important because people need to control the economy in whatever society they're living in. But they overlook the relationship of man to woman, of male to female, of masculine to feminine. And this is particularly important because we who are conscious, those conscious Africans, tend to identify the problem that Africa faces right now with the problem of what is called neocolonialism. That is, Malcolm called it dollarism. Garvey used a similar term, where money is used, the economies are used to control countries. So even though Africa has independence politically, they're dependent on the West financially, even though they have all the resources in the world that they need. The same thing in the Caribbean. So the relationship of male to female is really important because it also speaks to how can we reshape government in a way that it will work for us. So basically, in the world today, basically family systems are regarded as usually patriarchal in the Western world, where men rule. And we have seen that even white women are seeing around the world that's an oppressive system. Black women certainly see it because anytime one sex is ruling another, then it means domination. It's not freedom. Even if they're trying to do good, you don't know what the other partner wants or needs. That's what they have to determine. And then the other system that we've known in the world is matriarchy, where women rule. And it's a common assumption that ancient African civilizations were matriarchal, which is not true. If you study most of these societies that have been described as matriarchal, they were not. The people of ancient Ethiopia, they had a Kentucky system, Queen Mother system, and a Pharaoh system. And so it's often viewed that this is a case where women ruled. In fact, when a woman married the Pharaoh, she was adopted by the Pharaoh's mother. And so she became royal through royal adoption. And so her right actually came through the husband's family, not through the woman's family. And while there was dual power, the Kentucky Queen Mother had power and the king had power. It was not a case where the Kentucky was ruling alone. That is what matriarchy is. Societies ruled by women. So what I looked at in my book, my fourth book,
all right, just to let you know,
Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality, which is the most difficult thing I ever did. It took 14 disciplines to write this book, and it came from a vision that I don't have time to go in right now. But what I found is I looked at 14 ancient African family systems that precede Christianity and Islam, because I wanted to see what kind of family system did we have before outside influence. And what I found in 13 of the 14 family systems was the same family system. Looked different on the surface, but they were all the same. I looked at Swazi in South Africa, Lozi, another people in Southern Africa. I looked at the Asante family system, looked at the Twa. I looked at many different African family systems. And what I found running through all of them was the same model. It was a male-female model, and it went back to the Twa, the world's first people. My book, The Mother Principle, goes into the family system. My book, The Integration Trap, takes this to the next level and looks at how family affected every other level, including the formation of Kemet. And so what I found was that these family systems were not matriarchies ruled by females. They were not patriarchies ruled by males. Some, the last name came from the mother's family. Some, the last name of the child came from the father's family. But the last name of the father's family, last name of the mother's family, they resembled each other more than anything else. So patrilineal, matrilineal wouldn't fit. What I found was that these were systems that had twin lines of descent, where if the mother died, her wealth went to female children, because wealth was inherited according to responsibility. So since a female usually controlled the land, they were the agriculturalists, then the land wouldn't go to the male, it would go to the female. On the other hand, when the male died, often what he had went to the male side of the family, which was he tended cattle, he was the warrior, stuff like that. So that went to him. So what you found in descent was twinness. And then what I found is in governance, starting with the Twa, there was an equal empowerment system where males and females had an equal say-so. In the hunter-gatherer system, which gave birth to all humanity 144,000 years ago, the Twa, so-called pygmies, give birth to humanity. Men are hunters, women are gatherers. They gather the wild food stuff in the forest or the desert. The men go out and hunt for meat. So there's authority that's coming in the family through balanced responsibility in the family economy. Among the Twa, there's no abuse of women. And as Cheikana Diop pointed out, in ancient Africa, there was no abuse of women or elders or children. One reason was we're spirit-based. But the other reason, and therefore have high moral values. But the other reason was each was essential for survival. The woman was playing a role in the economy equal to the man. So this gives birth in family systems and in hunter-gatherer systems to consensus-based democracy. We give birth to democracy in the world. And African historians will tell you that the governance model for Africa is not majority vote. It's definitely not dictatorship. It's consensus. And so in the family, it's a consensus of male and female. So I concluded from this that the family model for ancient Africa was not matrilineal or matriarchal, not patrilineal or patriarchal, but I came up with a new term, twin-lineal, meaning your descent is traced not through your father alone or your mother alone, but mother and father, grandmother and grandfather. And God, if God is portrayed as human, which probably isn't, but if you are, then he, she. And that, therefore, inheritance is traced male-female. So that what happens is then, that is really the African way. And what I found is this works today. When I explain this to people, people have real good relationships. They'll usually say, I had a friend, his name was Oscar Wright, still alive. He's in his 90s now. He was co-chair with me of a group called Buffer, Black United Front chapter in Oakland, and he's a multi-millionaire. You'd never know it. He lives in the heart of Oakland, and he's a real estate man, but he's a community man. And so I explained twin-lineal to him, and he said, yeah, we had that. Of course, they didn't call it that. He said, when I got married, we sat down at the table, and we agreed that I'm in charge of what I'm good at, you're in charge of what you're good at. He was in charge of the money, because this man was excellent at business. Every time he'd come in to buy some real estate, his wife would say no. He would say, I'm in charge of this, and you're in charge of that. As a result, they became multimillionaires. Or I had another person who I was talking to, and he said, he met his wife in Africa, and she was a school teacher. And he said, I came out of a family where men did not really respect the minds of women. He said, but I came to realize that she was at least as smart as me, meaning smarter. And so what happened is he developed this respect at the mental level, and so the family worked based on that. And in other cases, it's just a question of what works in the family, but it's a balanced working of it. And twin-lineal in the family means that the husband and wife, they got to agree. And if they don't agree, then, hey, work it out. But it's the heart of the way we work. We're democratic people, and this system is the best system for carrying out a cultural renaissance, because in the States, for example, where black men are marginalized because they don't have good-paying jobs, the family is really the place to build your economy. And how do you build your economy? Through your culture. And I think that's true here as well and around the world. And we're good at improvising. And so if you get a male and female get together and they improvise and use their culture as the base, whatever you want to use, whatever kind of business you want to set up, that the family unit where two people are putting in their best ideas. My wife, for example, Pamela Shaka, she's from Barbados, born in Britain, raised in Barbados, went to high school in New York, and then I met her in Britain a number of years ago. She's a business lady, you know what I mean? She can sell anything. I said, I think that she could sell God to the devil. I don't think that the devil would end up in heaven, but I think she could sell it. Now, that's her skill.
Yes.
And she's got other skills. And so in any family, that's the way it works. And so this is, but this isn't just true for the family. Africa's in trouble because the governance models we have, these are governance models where brainwashed Africans who were trained at Sandhurst military academies, or were trained at UC Berkeley, or they were trained at who knows where, Western universities, trained in missionary schools. They've been trained to have contempt for their people. And they end up in power doing whatever their enemies tell them to do, whatever the Western corporations, the IMF, and whatever tells them. The reconfiguration of Africa to have really just societies, we need twin-lineal government, where the most just males and just females are empowered at every level, which in Ghana occurs at the village level. John Henry Clark made the point that if you want to know how to get Africa straight, look at Africa's villages. Many of these villages are the key to survival, and it's the women that are usually holding up Africa.
We're going to hold it there, Professor. I'm going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're opening the telephone lines, 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. A minute after 8 o'clock, we're going to go straight to the telephone lines, 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. Those are the numbers to call. Also, you can send me an email at andrea.williams@irfm.net, andrea.williams@irfm.net. You can send a Facebook post at Kabu Maat Kheru Williams, or follow me on Twitter and tweet there at Kabu Maat Kheru. All right, we go straight to the phone lines. Make your questions short, and we'll hang up afterwards. Hello, caller. Good morning.
Good morning, Empress Andrea.
Yeah, Hotep, how are you?
Hotep. Well, just got to know that you're bringing more education to the forum, you know.
Right, give thanks.
Professor Oberte Shaka.
Yeah, do you have a question for Professor Oberte Shaka?
Well, not a question. Just want to know that giving him thanks for the strength, you know, because I never know enough of these things with the CIA. So I'm not going to hold the line. Thank you, and have a nice day to all my brothers and sisters.
All right, thanks for calling. You made reference, Professor, particularly to what you said about the CIA, said you didn't know before.
Right. Are you going to another question?
No, we're going to take another question. Another caller, 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. Also, we'll take a question from your emails, but let me go back to the phone lines. Hotep?
Good morning.
Yes, Hotep, my sister, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, my African sister and my African brother, Professor.
Do you have your radio on?
No, I don't have my radio on.
All right, getting a feedback, but go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I just want to big you up for the work that you have been doing. I was listening to the BBC and Professor as well. I was listening to BBC the other day, and they were saying that in a country where the media is not free, the people are not free. And I just want to admire you because you're 1 in a million in Jamaica.
Right,
and you deserve a big up for that.
Thank you very much.
I'm very proud of you. The question I'd like to ask Professor, I'd like to ask him a question, and then I'd also like to make a statement or answer a question that you asked earlier this morning, Kabu, and let the Professor comment on that as well. I noticed, Professor, that a lot of you guys who were involved in the movement, in the African movement in America, you guys seem to be at a very young age. And in Jamaica, a lot of rote learning took place in our classroom. So a lot of people seem to be brainwashed, like the older people seem to be brainwashed in terms of our politics and so on. I was wondering, how can we get the young people to understand the movement of the black people so that they are no longer brainwashed? You understand what I'm saying to you? How can we get our young people involved so that they have a better understanding of where we're coming from?
All right, could you hang up and listen?
Can I just answer one question quickly first and then have him comment on that as well?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, you asked the question earlier, Kabu, that how can we find a way to prevent the re-enslavement of our people, right? And I think that the answer is in a quote that you have on your program as well as in this quote that I'm going to comment. I'm going to tell you. When we lose our African connection quote, he said that we're no longer connected, we're no longer a force in the world or something like that.
Yes.
I think the answer is in that, as well as this statement. I think it was from Marcus Garvey. A people who forget his history are doomed to repeating the mistakes of his forefather. And I think that the professor agrees with all of these points. And I think that it is just that our ancestors who helped to enslave us, all of these people, what am I saying? No, our enslavers are still on the same path of trying to enslave us, right? And if we look back in our past where we first had bauxite, and then we had, even the other day when
hold on, my sister, no, you're going to have to cut it short, all right? Thank you, the professor.
Okay, I'm going to cut it right now, Kabu. 1 second, one more second, sorry.
Half a second,
right? Yes. Even right now where they're burning our green gold fields and enslaving us to the IMF movement so that we will have nothing to profit from.
We leave it there. Yes, go ahead, the question, how can we?
Yes.
All right, okay. All right. Go ahead, Prof. Did you get the question?
Yeah, I got the question. Yeah. So the question was, how do we get our young people involved and how do we get them de-brainwashed? And her observation that young people played a very important part in the movement of the 60s. Young people play a very important part in revolutionary change all over the world, not just with black people, but that's true. I think that programs like this, IRE FM, is doing a very important job in terms of transmitting consciousness and information about Africa and African people. And you have the largest transmitter in Jamaica, so you have the power to reach a whole lot of people. So I think that is something that I know you're going to continue. Young people have to be exposed to the truth of our history and our culture. And very often in the public schools, whether it's in Jamaica, the United States, or wherever, you're very fortunate if you find a teacher who has been awakened and who can bring in good information to young people. And so if that happens, then they're fortunate. I don't know what the state of after-school education is in Jamaica. I know in the UK you have a system of Saturday schools. In the United States we have independent black schools and we also have Saturday schools. Saturday schools not as strong in the United States as it is in the United Kingdom. Yeah, not as strong here either, but we do have that. It's an additional cost and most parents are not able to afford. They should be free. The particularly Saturday schools should be free. The independent schools, I'm in a group called Pan-African People's Organization, and we have our own school, and it's been in operation since 1972. Community forums where information is exchanged on the history and politics, because I think to trigger an awakening among youth, you have to relate the past to the present. And so the youth need to see how things aren't working in Jamaica and why they aren't working and how that's tied into history. How is it that the IMF is able to come in and affect your bauxite industry, or to affect or put your milk farmers out of business? How did they do that? And tie that into history. What kind of leadership will let that happen? I think one thing that's needed for youth is leadership training. In the States, I'm setting up a thing called Perronk, Amilcar Cabral, Ella Baker Leadership Training. This is a apprenticeship system that woke many of us up, woke Malcolm up, woke me up, woke Cabral up, many others. And it's a system that you take youth through, and it's for adults as well, through stages of consciousness and awakening. And it's basically training them in leadership skills. But while you're training them in leadership skills, you're raising consciousness. So there's a variety of ways that conscious people, I saw a lot of conscious people at the Marcus Garvey commemoration, a lot of Rastas, a lot of conscious people, take that and use that to transmit this information to young people. But make sure you're transmitting facts, because now too much stuff coming on the computer, the internet, young people who are giving information who did not apprentice under any masters and who didn't do serious study, and so half the stuff they're telling is the truth and half the stuff is wrong, and they're not lying, they just don't know. And so make sure that what you're teaching, you know. And there's plenty of people out there here in Jamaica that know the truth about Africa and African people.
Let me go back to the phone lines. Hotep?
Hotep, Andrea. Hotep, Kabu.
Greetings, Garnet. How are you doing?
Hotep, Professor. Good. I am, well, the term Sam Kofa. I am looking back at the UNIA and the philosophy behind it as Marcus Garvey projecting 100 years forward. So it is more relevant now than it ever was. I credit Marcus Garvey for globalization and approve it by the first crowdfunding venture I ever read of is the whole business of the Black Star Liner.
All right, Garnet, in the interest of time, do you have a question for the professor?
Yeah. Professor, would you agree with me about crediting Marcus Garvey for globalization, seeing the UNIA was a global entity from way back in that time? I'll hang up on this.
All right, thanks, Garnet.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that's a good way you put it, too. That the Garvey movement was global. It had its base in the United States. It spread into the Caribbean, South America, Africa, and parts of Europe. Amazing, really amazing. And what I stressed in the presentation that I did at the Garvey commemoration last Sunday was that it spread for two main reasons. The talent of Marcus Garvey as a master propagandist, master organizer, and he was also a brilliant person, and the culture that he expressed, and that culture that drew from race consciousness, it drew from this idea of fierce African economic independence that comes out of the Caribbean, and this idea that we should run our own countries that comes out of societies where you're in a majority, as in the Caribbean, and this idea of spirit, one God, one aim, one destiny. Garvey's slogan on that, which the Garvey movement was like a religious political movement at the same time. So these were all reasons that this was powerful. What I think is important today is that we need to realize the power of our people. We have the ability, when we start a movement in one part of the world, to affect other parts of the world. So that should tell us our power. I think that today, Garveyism has to be readapted to the 21st century. So I used to be a strict Garveyite. I'm now a neo-Garveyite, meaning I used to believe, well, the answer was to go back to Africa, until I went back to Africa. And then I realized that we have a mission where we are. And I think the mission in Jamaica is to Africanize Jamaica and take the best out of African culture and use it to see that you're no longer under IMF misery rule, and, you come up under your own rule. And it's the same in the U.S., where it's harder because we're not the majority on the land. But we have to restructure America from injustice or lack of justice or injustice to justice. So this is the challenge. So Malcolm had reformulated it as he was originally talking about going back to Africa physically. Then later he said we should return philosophically, psychologically, culturally, and politically and change the reality where we are now. So I think that's the challenge, is to update Garveyism to today and to come up with our own ideas that we need now for our liberation now.
And in terms of globalization, and I've heard Garnett's thesis on his theory on globalization and Marcus Garvey over time, is that there is a difference in globalization, even though Marcus Garvey probably didn't conceptualize it as such, but he conceptualized a global movement and he moved toward that. There is a difference between what we now today call and define and see as globalization, complete different.
Yes.
As opposed to what Marcus Garvey was doing. What is the main difference, would you say?
Main difference is globalization comes disguised with grins and smiles. As Malcolm said, he said, when the fox comes into the hen house, the fox may be grinning. But he said the fox is a member of the canine family, and it means it's a dog, and it's coming out to eat you. And what happens with the International Misery Fund is they come in grinning. Lagarde was here, the head of the IMF recently, and they always talk like they're going to help you. But the International Misery Fund, the corporations, they are about enriching themselves and impoverishing everybody else. And so they're about oppression. Garvey's globalization was about liberation because he came from a liberated culture, and he was being financed by the people whose culture he expressed. There's an old saying we have, he who pays the piper calls the tune, meaning that whatever music is playing, you dance to that music. So is it African music? Is it African Caribbean music? African American music? Or is it European music? And in this case, music being used as a metaphor for oppression. So you got to pay your own way if you want to be free on every level. So Garvey expressed that.
We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue to take your telephone calls. When we return, 974-5079, 5051, 5043, and 1-888-991-4152. A quick break. 19 minutes now after 8 o'clock. You're inside of the Africa Forum. It's Running Africa, and my very special guest, Professor Oberte Shaka, and we are taking your telephone calls, your emails, and so on. All right, writing from the UK, listening on the internet at irfm.net, Ancobia, thank you very much for this, Ancobia. She says, well, I'll just say, because this is a nice note. The elder is very knowledgeable and I love his work. Have followed over the years and I've seen how African students wanting to enter leadership were inspired by his work, Art of Leadership. Today's generation, she says, have grown up with an entirely different value system from the 60s generation and before, even if the forces are the same. And she's saying, how are the elders going to hand over to the younger generation who have a different set of priorities today? What sort of values do they want to pass on to them? What are the practical things the youth can do? And she says, I speak to a lot of elders who say what we must do, but I'm not seeing the strategies, sis. And she talked about polygamy in the Caribbean. In Jamaica, the Caribbean is not a continuation of African family lifestyle. It is a leftover system from slavery, where the man would have to impregnate the woman and not necessarily take responsibility for them or their children. So quite a few things she said there. She says it is destroying the African family. For example, in Britain, 85% of children in Britain, and she says 85% of children in Jamaica born out of wedlock. And that statistic is not quite true because we talk about wedlock marriage, but there are family structures in Jamaica where people have not necessarily been in the church. And so that the research has been showing over the years that Jamaican families, the more men are actually present than the narrative has been saying, and good research by by Dr. Herbert Gale, for example, point to that. So we probably have to talk about marriage in a whole different context. But Professor, did you get those questions?
Yeah, I got those. Those are really penetrating questions. I thank the person for the comment.
Our sister Ann Cobia in the UK.
Yeah, Ann Cobia on the leadership piece. The first question she raised about the youth having a different set of values than we have, and how are we going to pass on some of these values that came out of the resistance movements of the 60s. First, I would say this, that while there's a generation gap, there's also much in common that the youth have with us. In the States, for example, the youth are very race conscious. If you look at this rebellion that's been going on around the murder of this black youth by a policeman, that is an example. A lot of the people who are demonstrating are youth. The youth are race conscious. They're very race conscious because they're facing racism. And in the Caribbean, in Africa, many of the values of the elders are still passed on. There's still some respect for elders, even though there's been an erosion of it. And there's still spiritual values that people hold on to, and humanistic values. But there has been a great deal of shift and change. So in terms of strategy, the one that I referred to a minute ago is the need to have an intergenerational strategy. And this is a strategy where we bring together some of the best representatives of the younger generation in the States, the hip-hop generation, in other parts of the African world, the youth, and conscious sectors that come out of black liberation movements. And what we need is to raise up the culture that our people have created. And in the case in the States, hip-hop, the radical sector of hip-hop that hip-hoppers like Mos Def represent, that Chuck D, a Public Enemy, represent, that underground hip-hoppers, Dead Prez, that is performed many times for the Black United Front.
Right, and we had M1 who was scheduled to be here, but we couldn't get him actually to be here.
Good brother.
Yes, for the
good brother. And there needs to be a marriage with them and people who cross ideological lines in my generation. Angela Davis, who may not be officially Afrocentric, but Angela Davis is a woman of principle who has stood up against the empire and has not bowed down. I have tremendous respect for her. Sonia Sanchez, who is respected by the hip-hop generation. By the way, I named both of her twin boys, Mangu and Morani, God and warrior. She was on the verge of having given birth to her child, and we were having a rally, about 300 people of our organization. She came in and said, Shaka, I need a name for my twin. And Sonia is somebody who is really conscious, beautiful woman, and I've seen how she's flowered and grown. Danny Glover, who comes out of the San Francisco State Strike, a guy that I know personally, who is now...
But does that call for reaching out by them in terms of that bridging that gap, in terms of what is passed on to the youth?
Say that again?
No, I'm thinking practically then, how does that work? So in terms of bridging the gap?
What has to happen is we need a formation that brings together representatives of these two groupings, a formation, some kind of a summit, some kind of formation that in the States would move around the country and begin to trigger dialogues at local levels, and particularly among young activists who are into new kinds of thinking, because this is a problem with the activists of the 60s. Too many are living in the past. Too many have got the old strategies, the old tactics. Whatever was done before, they want to do it again. Too many do not have the battlefield understood. Too many do not understand what's hit our community since the 60s. They're going off of Malcolm's prescription, which was accurate up to a point. Garvey's prescription, which was accurate up to a point. But these forces that have intervened since the late 60s, Malcolm never predicted these forces. Malcolm said that he thought the generation of the 60s knew what he wanted. He said he thought the next generation would know how to get it. He was right about the 60s. He was wrong about the next one because he couldn't predict that all these forces that hit us would take us off track. He couldn't predict it. And he was a prophet, but he couldn't predict that. So we need to have an analysis of the battlefield. And that battlefield is cultures are shifting. That's exactly what the person in the UK said. So I think we need to bridge it at the national level by bringing in the best representatives and then triggering discussion at the local level. But at the local level, it's got to be with new activists. New activists, and I'm hooking up with them in different parts of the country.
Yes.
They are new activists who know how to build economics on the ground, who are trying to rebuild families on the ground. Some of these are ex-cons who are coming out of prison. I'll be in Baltimore, Maryland on the 13th of next month. The brother's bringing me in. His name is Imhotep Fatal. Ex-con, served 2 terms in prison, but now has got him a study group.
So I hear you saying, Professor, that the response is a multifaceted response happening on many different levels, but also it has to be an organized response.
Right.
You know, it's not just going to happen mushroom.
Right.
So that organization, just before you go there, let me just remind our listeners, listen up, top draw, dollars, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4, cashpot. Early bird draws up next. That's coming up in just about 2 minutes. So we'll cut into the conversation as soon as that comes up. So that organizing then calls for strategy. And where and how do we work out those strategies?
Yeah, so for example, one, we need to trigger an intergenerational dialogue, because until you have that, you're going to have confusion between the generations. So we got to bring in people who have clarity on both sides. We've got to trigger a new African or African American cultural renaissance. What has to happen at the local level is a series of things. We need to implant in communities around the world systems for training leadership. That has to be at the local level, where we are transmitting our own traditions around apprenticeship, around organizing. We need to have, at the local level, massive after-school programs. And again, in the States, the best thing is to take models.
Let me cut you there, Professor, as we go to do some business. Now on IRFM, the time just 30 seconds away from the Supreme Ventures draw, cash top draw, dollars, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4, cash bot, and the early bird draws. You're listening to IRFM, and that is coming up right now. We're standing by to take that to you. Coming up in just a moment.
When we lose our African connection, we lose our rural connection. When we disconnect ourselves from Africa, we cease to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people, begging for the entry into somebody else's house.
All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. Running African, Professor T. Shaka is still with us, and we're in the final few minutes. But to go to your emails, and we are taking your telephone calls, quite a few coming from overseas. And let me just quickly go to Maurice Mambola, who's in the United States. He says, revolutionary greetings, Kabu. Professor Shaka wants us to build or develop in, say, America. What does he think the slave master's children to be doing in the meantime? Remember Black Wall Street in the U.S. or Africaville in Vancouver, Canada, to name just 2 places destroyed by white folks as it grew. If left alone, we can do it, but we will not be left alone. And he says, white folks will never allow us to build or develop independently in the West. Never. Why should we believe they would stand by and watch for their own demise? Before you respond to that, Professor, let me go to a telephone call. Hello, Kola Hotep.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, greetings, my sister. Go ahead.
Okay, greetings. I'd just like to big you guys up on what you're doing. My name is Donna from Osuja. I met Dr. Shaka at the Mwalimo Celebration birthday celebration, and I was quite impressed. And Miss Andrea, I've been a fan of yours, and also Dane Brown sends hello. And I'm letting Dr. Shaka know that the movement is strong. And Osuja is doing its part, and I'm paying close attention. And I think the answer that you guys are talking about in terms of integrating the older and the young towards a common movement and increasing awareness, the answer is through our music. And if we can revolutionize the music and also make it fun but educational, we'll see a big difference in the outlook of our young people.
All right.
Because they are our answers. And I just thank you so much, and just keep on doing the things that you're doing.
And thank you to my sister Donna from Osuja. Thank you very much. All right, Professor, we'll take the question, the comment made from our brother Mambola in the U.S. about what the children of the enslavers are doing.
Well, his basic observation at the end was whites won't let us develop ourselves and free ourselves in the Western world. Part of this answer has to do with your stage of consciousness. If you're at a stage of consciousness where you think whites are the center of everything and have all the power, then of course you will think that you have no power. If, however, you have undergone an awakening of consciousness, you'll understand a couple of things. Even Garvey understood that in the 20s. The West is in decline. The West at that time was Britain, France, Germany. They were going into decline. America was rising. America is now in decline. You're experiencing the decline of the U.S. in the defeat in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, and even in Korea. America is now dropping bombs in Iraq. They don't have the power to intervene. They went and destroyed Gaddafi in Libya, and now they've created nothing but chaos. We often think that we lack the power that we have. As this system goes down, we have to begin to figure out how do we construct something that is truly just. And it isn't just for us. We live in a multinational, multicultural country. It's complex. And at the bottom, the foundation, are African people. There are only two cultures indigenous to the U.S., Native American and African American. And our culture, the culture of African Americans, is the culture of popular choice for European youth, Asian youth, Latino youth, and even sectors of Native American youth, though they have their own indigenous culture. Our culture is the one that counters the culture of oppression in the United States and offers the real chance for liberation. So if we look at our youth now, there are sectors of our youth who are resisting. They are resisting right now over the murder of this young brother in St. Louis.
Prof, I'm going to interrupt you, Prof, because we have only about 2 minutes left to go. The caller before talked about the bridging the gap through music. She feels that music is
and she's right.
Yes. All right.
She's right.
Okay. Also, Full Free says, blessed love to you and your guest. Our problem is comforting materialism that is inferior because our worth and purpose is far greater than we accept. This is a fear of coming together as a community because of the spirit of those who are on the side of the oppressors, from the shores of Africa to the Great House, now Gordon House here in Jamaica, who make sure the mission is ongoing to keep us scattered, shattered, and battered. Technology has taken the knowledge of many, he says. So I think he's referring to those among us who, and I talk about this all the time too, those who are funded, those who depend on funding, and those who are really just on the side of the oppressors.
You know, one of the things about the 60s, not just in the States but around the world, is they spurred movements that were based purely on the inspiration of freeing our people. And San Francisco Civil Rights Movement or the Montgomery Bus Boycott or any of these movements, Black Panther Party, they were not dependent on any foundations or any corporations. And unfortunately, with the poverty program that came in the 60s, too often, too many of our people began to adopt the attitude that they couldn't struggle for liberation unless they got a grant or unless they got paid. And those grants limit you. And so we now have groups that have more money but less influence when it comes to changing our community. There's nothing wrong with having groups that have grants, and some of those grants are doing good things. But you need groups that are out there that are independent of any kind of economic financing from the outside. And that's based purely on the love of your people. And your people will financially support that.
All right, Professor, we have to wrap it here. I want to thank you so much.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
We have books that are here, and IREFM will have them, and we'll probably have them in other parts of Jamaica. The Integration Trap, Generation Gap Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures. That's what I've been talking on today. The Art of Leadership, Volume 1. And Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality. And I'm working on a book now on Mastery, which is our system of apprenticeship. And we also have some DVDs here. People want to check them out. We've reduced the price for Jamaica, so right. Jamaica can afford it.
And they will be right here, so give us a call if you want copies of the DVDs and the books by Professor Oberte Shaka. Professor, thank you so much. Thank you for coming into Jamaica.
I really enjoyed it. And I really appreciate you, your husband, and all the people who are working here. You've been very kind. And Sister Ka here is very serious. She doesn't play. And that's what I like. You know what I mean?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Oberte Shaka, and to your beautiful wife, Pamela T. Shaka, is here also with us. And safe journey back. I'm sure we'll talk to you many times before you go, but just publicly to say safe journey back.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you. We'll talk to you. Thanks much. Professor Oberte Shaka in the house with us this morning, just ahead of our local and international headlines coming up. But you can get a copy of the books. They're here. The Integration Gap, the Integration Trap, the Generation Gap Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures. That's one book, and there are others that will be on sale. We'll have those. Also to say that thanks to those persons who called in for this session this morning, and also those who wrote in. We didn't get a chance to read all your emails, all your posts, your texts, and so on, but we'll pass them on to the professor, your questions. He'll be here for a while longer. You're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African, just a minute away from news, which is coming your way, less than a minute actually, coming in your way right after this. All right, just about 8:45 on IREFM as we stand by for the local and international headlines. Right after that, it will be time for IREFM's Sunday Sports Diary, and we're hearing from Wade Brown, who is on the road, actually heading. Where you guys heading? Okay, he says, we are on the road on our way to covering the SDC T20 final in St. Elizabeth. Enjoying the show. International Misery Fun, LOL. I love that term. Thank you very much for that. Wade. And Primai, who's writing from Ghana, says, fantastic show. Sorry I missed last week. From what I heard you say today, I really missed out big time. Love the discussion on Marcus Garvey. Primai, you could have taken it live this morning. All right, so time now for the local and international headlines. Standing by with that is Lanagay Green. Local and international headlines coming up right now. Thank you very much, Mr. Roger Hasbro.
You're welcome.
You know, this is not TV. You can't just indicate to me that I must take it away. I'm the only one seeing you.
Yeah, well,
right. So just let our listeners know that that's what you did. You know, you just gave me the hand, like, take it away. Take it away. All right. So how are you?
I'm good.
I didn't see you perform at the Marcus Garvey. Well, you did the Marcus Garvey poem, but I didn't see you do your own thing. Didn't you perform?
No, I didn't.
What happened?
Communication.
Oh. That's some serious. You mean miscommunication?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. It was that timing.
That is quite something. You're going to have to talk to me about that miscommunication. I was there watching you and watching you and hoping that I'd see you, but at least I did see you on one. So how was it for you?
You mean
the day?
Wonderful. Truly inspired by especially Prof's speech.
Yes.
And I plan to go and listen it over and over again.
Yes, we're going to block you from it.
Well, it's easily accessible from this side.
Yes, I know. But I'm really just joking.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Most of us plan to do that, and we've been getting some requests for it.
It was a good day. I mean, I truly enjoyed that Marcus Garvey poetry segment as well.
Yeah,
not because I was on it, but
I know, but it was good. It was good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and a lot of people never know that Marcus Garvey write them kind of poetry.
Yeah, and you really dramatized. You know, you selected your poem way in advance.
Yes,
and well, a lot of things people didn't notice.
Yes,
because poetry was presented. We had two poems. One poem read by two different persons.
Yes,
and the presentation was so different.
Yes,
and so good in both cases. An interpretation, and in both cases. Wow, that's quite something.
Yeah.
Now we know.
Yes.
Mr. Tekla McFed, good morning, sir. Yeah, great job. And all those on that team. So we're going to be moving into another segment. You remember that at the event, Professor Oberte Shaka was given a commemorative plaque, right? So the gentleman who made that plaque is Tyrone Napier, and he's here. And with the plaque again. So he's going to be coming in a minute or so. Because they made that, because what Professor Shaka got last week was a prototype. It was beautiful, wasn't it?
Yes, it is. So, I saw it a while ago.
Yeah. And here's another one too. All right, so Prof is gone with his one already? We couldn't get another look at it? All right. Okay, come Tyrone. All right, so we're going to be moving to that. Just sit right beside Roger. Roger, set him up there, because I'd help me in this segment. All right, so we're also going to be talking in a minute or so with Feroz Manji, who will be talking to us live from Canada about the book, Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral, edited by Feroz Manji himself and Bill Fletcher. By way of full disclosure, I haven't read the book yet, so this is not a book interview. We're just talking about the launch of the book and a little bit about Amilcar Cabral, who was he, and so on. We've heard, interestingly enough, isn't this? It wasn't planned that we've heard so much about him this morning. He's featured in the interview I had with Professor Shaka, and also we heard his name even in an organization, a leadership course. All right, brilliant. So now we're looking at the plaque again. Well, you actually carried two. Okay. Tyrone, good morning. All right, Tyrone, not hearing anything. All right. So we're looking at two. So this is a coat of arms. This is a coat of arms, and this is made out of, it looks like bronze. All right, so what do we have here? Good morning, Tyrone Napier. All right, sorry, my fault. Yes, good morning again.
Kabu.
Yes, good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, good to have you with us. And works done by yourself and your brother, actually, and your brother is? Your brother's name?
Paul Napier.
Oh, Paul Napier. We're calling you Napier. That's wrong. All right, so Paul Napier, and he's a principal of?
The Tivoli Garden Comprehensive.
All right. Wasn't able to make it this morning, but here you are with great works that you do. Tell us, okay, so we're looking at one here that Ken is holding. Describe this one that was presented to Professor Shaka for me, please. This is a bust of Marcus Garvey raised on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-pointed star. Yes. So tell us about it.
Okay. That is a bus that we both came together to commemorate the 100th year of the UNI movement.
Yes.
And it is a 5-pointed star, which was one of the symbols that Marcus Garvey had used. It is as a circle in the back, which will represent the globe, and there's a pentagon, which is a five-sided figure, which is like a house, a shelter, and then his features is imposed by the artist, my brother, inside of that.
Right. And the feature is made out of what? What's the material? Let's see.
It will be originally done in bronze, but this is the actual work, so it's not.
All right. Yes. So we have the 5-pointed star, and this is in the color of the black, red, and green. All right. And this is all set on what size is the frame that is set on?
It's a 20 by 20 frame.
Right. It looks good. It really. Roger, what do you think?
Yeah, man.
Oh, you change of thing. Where are you there? Go on.
Here now? Yeah, man. Excellent. Okay. I mean, the whole artistic, the whole artistic background.
Yes.
Actually excellent.
It is beautiful. And then the coat of arms. This was the... Okay, so whose coat of arms is this?
This is our national coat of arms.
Oh, okay. So who you give it to? As a can with it. Yes. Okay, so you just carry this to show?
Yes, to show.
All right. Okay, this is made by you also?
Yes.
Very good. Very, very good, yes.
It's the artwork was done by Keith Reese, artist that I worked along with. And the casting, which is done in aluminum, metal casting, which is a very special technique that is used, is done from scrap metal, recycled, and cast to give you a finish like that.
It's very good. A crocodile on the top, and is it alligator? What is on the top of it? What are some of the names? Crocodile. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5 pineapples on top. Really, really good.
And the indigenous people.
Yeah,
indigenous people.
Out of many one people. Very, very. Because you're far, I can read it from out of many one people. All right, and you also have with you, thanks Ken, and Professor Oberte Shaka is going to be taking back with him to the U.S. The bust of Mwalimo Marcus Messiah Garvey as made by the Napier brothers. And you have with you there, Tyrone?
Well, this is my idea of Kabu. This is the map of Africa, this is the outline of it, and this is Jamaica instead. So when I listen to the program, I say, but Jamaica represent to me, and I looking out for the interests of Africa, and you are the person who was doing it eloquently well on the air. So
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much. Do I get it, or is you just use me and then go back with it?
Okay.
You use me the time.
No, really. If we can have a copy of it, but this is the original. But we can give you a copy because we do this work.
I'm not going to pressure you. I'm glad that use me, Tyrone.
For the benefit and the movement of our development.
Reuniting the African family for development.
Yeah.
So it's a map of Africa and situated in the Africa has a crown on one side, which would be maybe a horn on one side, which would be like Ethiopia and so on, and then on the other side West Africa and parts of North and Central Africa are. That is like the head back. So Africa is situated in the crown there. I mean Jamaica. Yeah. All right, just so I can describe things though. So you understand it, Kean, without even seeing it. So there's a map of Jamaica that's superimposed right there. Love it. You love it, Roger, right?
Yes, I love every one of them.
Yeah. So that is abstract. All right. So what is it we have? Is this like a small replica of a?
That's for you.
Oh, this is for me. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So what we have is a replica of the old-time.
Coal stove
with a little place where you push the coal in, and the Dutch pot, and the Dutch pot on top of it with a cover on top of the Dutch pot. This is no, this is wonderful. This is great.
That's a nice.
This is really nice because this is not something you're going to cook out or send it. Something you're going to put on your house as decoration.
A conversational piece, because what I find unique about this is that people see it, they begin to remember days gone by.
Yes, because it's a real coal stove and a Dutch pot on it with a Dutch pot cover and everything, and the two little things at the side of the coal stove if you leave it up with you, and the little part to put the coal in. Really nice.
That's the part where the coal dust comes out.
No, when the dust come out, that's true. You put the coal inside here, sir. Boy, Roger, me I tell you, Talk about age, man. The man know the thing. But really, so tell me a little bit about your company.
Napier patterns, molding, and castings is engineering concept that's been in the Kitson Town area in St. Catherine. I actually learned my skill at an engineering complex known as Kingston Industrial Works, which is now changed to Caribbean Castings and is now out of business. But I acquired the skill as a pattern maker, and the pattern making skills allow me to dabble in almost anything. Because if you're making patterns for industry like a gear wheel, a bearings, a sprocket, then you have to have this precise discipline. And with that discipline, that company has gone out now, but I have it and I use it, I merge it and create it with the craft, and so I am able to do wide variety of craft.
Well, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, how much, of your inspiration and your craft go about in telling a story?
Well, it's a very interesting story to tell, because in my days, we didn't have much of the computer and the technology, so we had to acquire skill to occupy your time. So I was sent to this place by my parents, and I did a 5-year apprenticeship. And during that time, I became what is known as a master pattern maker. So you were able to do
a master
pattern maker.
Pattern
maker. Yeah. And that is not for clothes, that's for industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, these are really good. How can persons find you? Because these, the Dutch pot that I get with a coal stove, it's a beautiful thing for a gift for people like myself, so you read me right. And then the bust for Marcus Garvey, the map of Africa with Jamaica superimposed on it, and also the coat of arms. Brilliant work. How can persons reach you?
Well, my shop is in Kitson Town, St. Catherine. The number is 855-8598. But I also represent a craft cooperative, which is Jamaica Creative Craft, and we do authentic Jamaican craft, because there is a niche market for authentic craft, as you know, that the bling bling and the shine thing is being copied and sent back to us. So we decide to do something with Jamaican idea and material.
Well, when we travel to the continent of Africa, we look for particular kinds of art to carry back home. I always do that, and I'm going into the markets and I'm going into the areas where I know I can find real African, authentic, whether it's Ghanaian or any other country, Egypt and so on. So, and we always look for these. And if I come into Jamaica, say, as a visitor, visitor or not, I would buy these. Because these are the kinds of stuff I look for, that they don't have the Chinese imprint on them. Like when we say Chinese, make quick, make fast, and make my whole heap of people on the assembly line. They don't have that look. They're one of a kind, authentic, genuine, and representative of some. There's a spirituality to them.
Yes,
representative of us, of ourselves. Thank you very much, my brother Tyrone Napier. And especially thank you so much for my little Dutch pot and stove.
Okay, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being on your show. And you're one of my favorite programs. I listen to every Sunday morning. That's my church program.
Thank you for that. We appreciate that. All right, so Tyrone Napier there with beautiful art and craft work out of Kitson Town. And for persons who are calling about the books from Professor Oberte Shaka, the books are here at IRIE FM, and the books are for $1,500, and the CDs the same, the DVDs actually the same, $1,500. And you can also contact, and this number is for Professor Oberte, 510-569-5395. That's 510-569-5395 for Professor Oberte Shaka. Wait until he returns to the U.S. As you know, that's a U.S. number. And he'll return later on this week. So 510-569-5395. 12 minutes now after 9 o'clock. Saying a very special good morning to Janet and Ernest Smith. Janet Smith and Ernest Smith, my sister JJ. We're trying to get you on the phone. Are we? Okay, yes, we're trying to get you on the phone, and we want to do that before Professor's left. All right. In any case, Ken, give her a call again. All right, you're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African. So thank you very much, Concrete Asphalt, and also Tyrone Napier. We're going to be going back to the telephone lines, and this time it is to speak with a very, very special guest, Feroze Manji, editor of the book Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral, edited by Feroze Manji and Bill Fletcher Jr. And we just said how interesting it is that Amilcar Cabral's name was featured in the interview we just had with Professor Oberte Shaka for the entire hour and 45 minutes. We had quotes from him. We had Professor tapping into the theories, looking at Amilcar Cabral, looking at possibly where we went wrong, where the weaknesses were, and saying how do we go forward, identifying him as one of the most important thinkers of our times. So this is very, very interesting, and this was not planned. As I said before, was not planned at all. It just happened that way. That's when you know that spiritually we are on the right plane. So now we're going to be going to the phone lines to speak with Feroze Manji. The book will be launched in Canada later on this month. Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral. And we're standing by to speak with Feroze Manji about the launch of the book. Once again, I have not yet read the book, so it will not be a book interview. But definitely we'll hear a little bit more about this great African Amilcar Cabral. Feroze Manji joins me on the phone lines. My brother Feroze Manji, thank you so much for joining us on the Africa Forum.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Right. You're in a space, may I just tell you this, in which you're well known, because whenever you speak, whether it's about Dr. Walter Rodney or many other issues that you speak on, and we can find your clips anywhere, we take them back right here on this program. So let me let me confess that. So you're well known here. All right.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So first of all, a little bit about Amilcar Cabral. It's very, very interesting that we have, I think he, in terms of ancestral spirit, whether or not we wanted to go there, I think we have to go there, because this interview with you we organized a while back, and yet this morning we have been talking so much about him with my guest just before you, who had no idea, by the way. So let's talk about this great African, Amilcar Cabral. Who was he?
I think you're quite right that Cabral was an extraordinary African, extraordinary thinker, extraordinary revolutionary. I think few people realize that he was a scientist, an agronomist, a theoretician of liberation, a poet, and someone who was directly involved with people in his own country, amongst the peasantry, and whose aspiration was to create the world we want to live in tomorrow, but to create it today. And I think that's probably one of his most important contributions. Mm-hmm. He was somebody who understood that, people don't that ordinary people don't go for ideas. They're looking for a better future, for a way of ensuring that their children can grow, can develop. It's not ideas they're after. They're after concrete reality, things that really make a difference today. Mm-hmm. And one of the most remarkable things was that he created in the liberated territories in Guinea-Bissau a society which ran on completely different rules, different morality, different ethics from what you would find in the occupied territories from the Portuguese. And that is, I think, a really important aspect of Cabral, mm-hmm. That we need to create today the world we want to live in tomorrow. It's just great that you had reference to Cabral on the discussions earlier on, and it's wonderful to see Cabral contribution at last being recognized. And I think his writings need to be looked at more carefully for us to actually contend with the problems we have today. Take, for example, I was asked recently, why have we got so many despots in Africa?
Yes.
And it struck me, well, that's quite an important question. Why do we have such so many despots? And then I looked back at Cabral and realized that even he had looked at this and understood a very fundamental fact, that what happened at independence, certainly in all of Africa, was that rather than transform the colonial state, the nationalist movements occupied it. They took it over. But this state was designed to protect the interest of empire, to protect their ability to extract resources, extract profits from the colonies. And it cannot serve the interests of the masses. It has to be completely destroyed. Cabral put it this way, he said, the problem is not that we have a white administrator. It's that we have an administrator at all. He was very clear that there was no way that you can take over the state. We have to destroy it. We have to completely demolish it and create a state which is designed to meet the needs of the masses.
And so as a revolutionary, and this is a part of him that I tapped into very, very early in my development, even as a student, that as a revolutionary, he talked about the fact that we had said enough. Bob Marley has a song where he says, enough has been said already, now let it be done. And he says, we have talked enough, and we cannot we cannot shout at injustice and oppression and shout it away, but that there comes a time when we have to take up arms and fight. That's a very radical thing. I mean, then, and more so, I think, even now, because to say that is to incite violence and all the consequences that come with that. But how relevant is that statement in this time?
Well, put it this way: under Portuguese colonial rule, the scale of what could be parallel to what we today call genocide. If you think about the violence, the killings that were happening by the Portuguese, under those conditions, you cannot expect people not to resist. But the same situation today we look in Palestine. That they have an occupied territory. They have thousands of young children who have been arrested and detained without trial. You have hundreds of people who have been, thousands of people who have been disrupted out of their lives and forced to leave the country. You have a situation where that constant violence against an oppressed people creates violence as a defensive reaction against that. And so Cabral's writing, as are the writings of Fanon, really important today in understanding the nature of what is going on in Palestine. Indeed, I would say they are relevant to what is going on in Ferguson today. That you cannot continue to be cruel to people, to exploit them, and not expect a resistance. And there is an important thing here. People talk often about violence in resistance, but very few people talk about the violence of the oppressor. And one of the things that Fanon, as well as Cabral, pointed out, that what violence does to people who are the violators is actually to result in dehumanizing them. And that we have seen very seriously in Palestine. We've seen the same thing today the crisis that's occurred in Libya and in Iraq and in Afghanistan. The creation of the use of violence to solve political problems will inevitably result in counter-violence. So Cabral was not a proponent of violence. What he was absolutely clear about is that the oppressed, the exploited, have a right to defend themselves against violence.
He was also concerned, as we are today, and we have been, ever since. Well, this is that neo-colonialism, concerned with classism, and talking specifically of the petite bourgeoisie and so on. For our particular context here in Jamaica, this, I think, is something that more than any other Caribbean country we face: shadism, colorism, call it what you want, classism, almost rigid here on the island. Let us talk a little bit about how relevant his writings are to today in terms of the scourge of classism, which continues to impact African diaspora and continental African countries.
Well, I think the same is true in all of our countries in Africa, so I'm sure they are true in the Caribbean, and that is that there is an elite that lives off and benefits from the labor and immiseration of the majority of people. Class is a concrete reality. It's something that people talk about, the great Africa rising. The great thing that has risen in Africa is the difference between the rich and the poor. And I'm sure the same situation is happening in the Caribbean. It's not classism. It's a reality of reflection that there are in society those who the Occupy movement called the 1%, who benefit, and the rest who are exploited, are immiserated, are impoverished by a system that ensures those great profits. But what I think what Cabral was amazing about was his understanding that you can't just use cliches about class and about Marxism. He wrote, we do not fall back on cliches or merely harp on the struggle against imperialism and colonialism in theoretical terms, but rather we point out concrete things. And he went on to say, hide nothing from the masses of our people, tell no lies, expose lies wherever they are told, mask no difficulties, mistakes, or failures, claim no evil.
Did we lose you there, Feroze? Did we just lose you? All right, I think we might have lost Feroze Manji. Hello? All right, can we get him back quickly? You might have just recognized one of the recurring themes of this program, voiced by Sister Nana Tendai. Hide nothing from the masses of the people. The words of Amilcar Cabral, as a matter of fact, all those words read by Nana Tendai that you hear every morning, many times before the program is done, each Sunday morning, are words from Amilcar Cabral, one of the greatest thinkers of all time, but not just a thinker, as you heard Feroze Manji saying just now, a scientist. He was a poet, he was a man of the people, directly engaged in working with peasants to establish a new society in liberated zones. He was a theoretician of liberation on the tip of his lips, wherever he was. And we're looking at the importance of his writings, but I want to talk about the launch of the book that's going to be happening in Canada in a few days. I think we need to get the time from Feroze Manji when that is going to happen. If you're listening in Canada, I'm quite sure that you'll be interested in this, and if you're traveling to Canada anytime soon, also you might be interested in getting your hands on a copy of this book. Very relevant in this time. Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral, edited by Feroze Manji and Bill Fletcher. Quick break, we come back. Now 9:31, and we are trying to get Feroze Manji back on the line. It kind of just faded out, and I'm wondering if that was a battery problem with his phone, because it really just faded right out. Anyway, we're still trying to get him back on the phone lines. The book, Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral, is edited by Feroze Manji and Bill Fletcher Jr. in Dakar, and chapter 26, Amilcar Cabral and Pan-Africanism, is written by Explo Nana Kofi. There's an introduction by Feroze Manji and Bill Fletcher, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral, The Struggle of Memory Against Forgetting. Then we have No Easy Victory, Some Reflections on Amilcar Cabral's legacy by Nigel Gibson. We have Samir Amin talking about class suicide, the petit bourgeoisie, and the challenges of development. Ahmed Lowe, a very good friend to the program, has a chapter in the book also, Amilcar Cabral and the Pan-African Revolution. And Carlos Swartz is there, Richard Laban, Ryland Rabaka, Nigel Westmars, also a very good friend to the program, has a chapter, Weapons of Theory Employing Amilcar Cabral in the Present. And I think we really need to read that chapter and have a conversation about that. Weapons of Theory Employing Amilcar Cabral in the Present. We haven't read it, but we can just imagine. All right. Audrey Farad is also there. Mustafa Dada, Cabral, his thoughts and actions. Also, Louis Gordon, Jacques Delpechin, Augusta Henriquez, Thinking with Our Own Heads and Walking with Our Own Feet. Then there's also a chapter on Telling No Lies is Not Easy. Bill Minter, Telling No Lies is Not Easy. So it looks like a book that we really must get. Each, home should have one of these books. And it's divided into different segments. There's reflections. Let me see what the segments are. So the segments are The Legacy of Cabral, Reflections on Cabral. Then there's Cabral, Women and Emancipation. And in that chapter, Stephanie Udang has written on But We Have to Fight Twice, Reflections on the Contribution of Amilcar Cabral on the Liberation of Women. And then there's Cabral and the Pan-Africanists, and Culture and Education, Cabral and the African-American Struggles, and so on. All right, so I think we will have to call it a day with the interview with Feroze Manji. But the book is going to be launched in Canada. And that's the thing, is that we do not have that information. But the book is going to be launched in Canada this week. As soon as we get this month, as soon as we get that information, we will share that with you. What you could do for me, Ken, is to call Ameth Lowe, who is also in Canada. Ameth Lowe is one of the directors of GRILA, the Group for Information and Liberation of Africa. And he should be able to give us some quick information on the launch itself, because I know persons are listening in Canada and are standing by to be part of that. All right, another quick break and we'll be right back.
Speak truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth.
All right, still having a bit of difficulty getting back to Feroze Manji. But what we can tell you about the launch of the book, Amilcar Cabral today, what responses to Africa's current challenges, AFRICOM, NATO, French military interventions, a different book list. Saturday, August 30, 2014. Saturday, August 30, 2014. And this will be 4 to 6 p.m., 746 Bathurst Street, Toronto. That's 746 Bathurst Street, Toronto, ON, M5S2R6. Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral, book launch and discussions with contributors. Africa's current challenges, escalation of the militarization process, intensification of resource and land grabs, Inter-imperialist rivalries in a context of China's new entrenchment in Africa. It's free and open to the public. And for more information, you can call Grilla at 416-721-4531. That's 416-721-4531. You can also follow Grilla on the social media, grila.org, grilla.org. So once again, it's a book launch and discussion that's happening on Saturday, August 30, 4 to 6 p.m. in Toronto, 746 Bathurst Street. And some very interesting topics being discussed. Escalation of the militarization process, intensification of resource and land grabs, and inter-imperialist rivalries in a context of China's new entrenchment in Africa. Certainly wish I could be there. Saturday, August 30, 4 to 6 p.m., Canada. Yeah, you know, I'm thinking about it, right? Heck yeah. How does one get to Canada in a week? Well, in a few days. All right. All right, quickly, the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry, comprising Sir Richard Cheltenham as chairman, Mrs. Jacqueline Samuels Brown, QC, and Mr. Sinath Jairam, will be convening public hearings as follows. The 25th, which is tomorrow, the 26th, the 27th, 28th, 29th of August at 9:30 a.m. Witnesses likely to testify: Lieutenant Colonel Sidney James of the GDF, Lennox King, Father Malcolm Rodriguez, and Mrs. Jocelyn Doe. Information supplied here to us by Professor Wazir Mohammed. By the way, for all the latest information on the Commission of Inquiry into the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney, you can follow that on Facebook, the Justice for Walter Rodney Facebook page. Just type in on Facebook, Justice for Walter Rodney. It takes you right to the page. All right. There will be mass meeting in St. Anne, UNIA mass meeting in St. Anne, Sunday, August 24, that's today. This will be at the Marcus Garvey Youth Information Center beginning at 3 p.m. It goes to 6 p.m. and it's in St. Anne's Bay at the Marcus Garvey Youth Information Center with Stephen Golding, and admission is free. Bring the family and all are welcome. Also, the Department of Sociology, Psychology and Social Work presenting Thought and Action in the African Diaspora, Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, Nation of Islam, Black Panther Party, Malcolm X and the Organization of Afro-American Unity, and the Rastafari Movement. There is no exams for this one. The lecturer is Dr. Imani Tafari Amma, and this class will be, she says, coming at you September 1, 2014. So it's on Wednesdays 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. and Thursdays 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. You're invited to register now. For more details, contact the Department of Sociology, Psychology and Social Work, 977-0315 or 977-6267. Thought and Action in the African Diaspora. The courses begin on September 1, Wednesdays 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. and Thursdays 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. No examinations on this one. So, I don't know if that is good news, Imani, but I'm sure you'll see a rush on this course now. Many persons signing up. All right, do that, please. All right, my good friend Leon Bourne is back in the island. Hey, Miss Lee, good morning to you. The cultural celebration by the sea will be held on Sunday, August 31, starting at 3 p.m. You can't afford to miss that. Cultural celebration by the sea. And that is going to be August 31 at 3 p.m. at the Ultimate Jerk Center in Discovery Bay, St. Anne. All are invited to come and perform and enjoy the event. Well, sincerely hope we didn't miss any of the announcements that you sent to me overnight. Listen now, for the announcements, you really do have to get them to us earlier than Saturday night. All right, it's not funny. You really do have to get them to us earlier than Saturday night. Not working out at all. Quick break. 9:44, you're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African. And I think we do have to play a little bit more from Amilcar Cabral. Let's do that.
Speak truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth. .45 now, and time for the bottom line. The bottom line is that, as Amilcar Cabral says, when your house is burning, it is no use beating the tom-toms. One thing we know, Africa is burning. Africa is burning, and so the question is it enough to just talk about it? The issues that are confronting us, African people, wherever we are, on the continent of Africa, in the African diaspora, is it enough to just talk about it, these issues? Or is it time, as Amilcar Cabral argues, to realize that we're not going to eliminate oppression and injustice, neocolonialism and new slavery, imperialism and land grabbing, by shouting against it? That for us, the best or worst shout against our continued oppression by our various governments, multinational corporations, foreign agencies and local agencies and institutions, that our best or worst shout is to fight back. The bottom line is that we must fight back. We must fight back against genetically modified foods and products flooding our farms, markets, and shelves. We must fight back against the incursion of Monsanto into Africa and the Caribbean, and against the individuals who represent Monsanto. We must fight back against a government who would appoint an ambassador whose major client list includes Monsanto to represent Jamaica at the Africa Union. We must fight back against a system that is locking us out of our beaches and denying us access to our coastlines. We must fight back against a regime that is presiding over the biggest non-reversible corporatization or land grab of our land and agriculture since slavery. We must fight back against this. We must fight back against the militarization of the African continent and the Caribbean waters by the United States through AFRICOM and the CBSI. We must fight back against AFRICOM. We must fight back against the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. The bottom line is that Africa and the African diaspora, including Jamaica, are right now, at this minute, as we speak, being confronted with one of the most intense thrusts ever
to open up the continent like a prostitute and its diaspora to genetically engineering foods and products. African countries such as Zambia, Senegal, and Nigeria in particular, which had previously resisted attempts from Monsanto and Syngenta to flood the continent with genetically engineering seeds and products, have relented and are now opening up their borders to GMOs, from cassava to maize and everything in between. Nigeria is an interesting case because, as I told you just about 4 weeks ago, right here in this forum, Good Works International, whose co-executives are Jamaica's ambassador to the Africa Union, Ambassador Carlton Masters, and former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson. I told you that Good Works International have as their clients Monsanto and Nigeria. I told you then to watch Nigeria to see the extent to which Nigeria would be forced to open up to genetically engineered foods and crops. Well, guess what? Is it a coincidence that Nigeria is one of the African countries where we are now seeing this renewed and intense push for genetically engineered foods and products, and that this push is being spearheaded by ministers of government in Nigeria and other highly placed officials in Nigeria? In fact, Nigeria has just announced that it sees nothing wrong with genetically engineered foods and products, and are now on a massive campaign in Nigeria to introduce GMOs into that country. Cassava. Genetically engineered cassava have been approved in Nigeria, cultivated in Nigeria, embedded in Nigeria. We have some questions to ask ourselves about cassava here in Jamaica, because round about the same time that Nigeria was saying yes to cassava, genetically engineered cassava, we were being told here in Jamaica that we must grow more cassava, and we didn't stop to check to see where the cassava was coming from, or whether or not Monsanto was behind the cassava. We must ask ourselves questions, or we'll find that the food going in the ground is can't plant again once we eat one time. The bottom line is that Nigeria does not have a biosafety law, and therefore does not have the mechanisms in place to monitor and control the influx of genetically engineering foods into the country. Neither does Senegal. And Zambia, as we know, was pressured into accepting GMOs a few years back, or else. But what is driving this new push for genetically engineered crops and foods in Africa and the African diaspora? Especially when the research has shown that genetically engineered crops do not give more yield than natural crops, and that it is cheaper to fund the transportation of natural food within and across Africa, among African countries, than to ship ton loads of GMOs into Africa. What is behind this push? Who is behind this push? The rate at which vast acres of land are being grabbed by Monsanto, Syngenta, Dow AgroSciences, BASF, Pioneer H-Bread International, and Bayer Crop Science, they are all genetic engineering organizations, the Big Six they are called. The rate at which they are grabbing land in Africa is unprecedented. The bottom line is that all the civil rights activists and activists for social justice in Nigeria and across the continent of Africa agree that there are very powerful forces behind the push towards genetically engineered foods and products into Africa. In fighting back, who do we fight back against? Sergeant for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah challenges us to define and know and name our enemies. I don't have the answers, I just have questions. I'm seeking for the answers. I'm seeking truth. What is the relationship between the unholy haste to introduce GMOs into Nigeria and the representation by Good Works International of both Nigeria and the company with the largest market share of genetically engineered crops in the world, Monsanto? What is the relationship? To what extent is this relationship made into an even sweeter deal by the appointment of one half of Good Works International, Ambassador Carlton Masters, as Jamaica's representative to the Africa Union? I don't have the answers. I only have questions. And sometimes it's not the answers that are given that is a problem. It's the questions we ask. It's the questions. The questions are always more important than the answers. Remember that. One of the first rules of journalism. Simple. But it's not the answers that matter. It's the questions we ask. Because if we miss the questions, we'll never ever get the answers. So those questions I cannot answer as yet. But I am concerned that even the very appearance of a conflict of interest in this matter is too much to sit back and do nothing. As I am concerned that we saw the same unholy haste to push cassava into the farming habits of small-scale farmers in Jamaica who were doing quite well with their yams and sweet potatoes, which we understand will now be imported into the country. Genetically engineered, we do not know. Another question we must ask. And yes, doing quite well with cassavas too, natural cassavas. The bottom line is that we do not know the extent to which genetically engineered foods have entered the food chain here in Jamaica. We certainly do not know if our cassava and sweet potatoes have been compromised. Monsanto's major objective is to flood the continent of Africa and its diaspora, the world for that matter, with genetically engineering food and products so that they can control the food industry. The scary part of that is that once genetically engineering organisms, seeds and other products are unleashed into any country, they cannot be recalled. Doesn't work that way. So this is what we call food terrorism. Monsanto, Syngenta and the rest of them are guilty of food terrorism. Who in Jamaica? Which organization is responsible for monitoring genetically engineering food at our borders? What are the laws governing GMOs in Jamaica? Does Jamaica have a biosafety policy? And if so, how is it being implemented and enforced? Can Jamaica actually say no to Monsanto when Monsanto is a client of Good Works International, one half of Good Works International being our ambassador to the Africa Union, and the other half being our beloved former Prime Minister? Can Jamaica say no to food terrorism from Monsanto? We must fight back. This is not the time for singing and dancing and beating the drums. It is not the time for the tom-toms, unless it's the sound of a communication drum, beating the cry of war and calling the soldiers to order. In fighting back, we demand of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Portia Simpson Miller, that she declares whose interests does Ambassador Carlton Masters represent at the Africa Union. Is it Monsanto, Nigeria, Chevron, Coca-Cola, Carlton Masters represent at the Africa Union? Is it Monsanto, Nigeria, Chevron, Coca-Cola, the people of Jamaica? We call on the Prime Minister to declare that with Good Works International representing energy companies such as Mirant, who was recently in Jamaica, Coca-Cola and Monsanto, how are we to respond to the triple threat of land grabbing for natural resources for energy by international companies? The fight to label genetically modified foods and genetically modified foods coming into Jamaica, which are now being pushed on the African continent. We call on the Prime Minister to declare, how can we, Africa and the Caribbean, Jamaica in particular, protect against big pharma and their efforts to push pharmaceuticals on developing countries, pharmaceuticals tied to aid and trade, when our representative at the Africa Union represents Sumitomo Chemicals, producers of pharmaceuticals and vast amount of chemicals. How are we to fight back? With Ambassador Carlton Masters as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, we call on the Prime Minister to declare, why should we expect that he will at any time put Jamaica's and Africa's interest before that of a Council on Foreign Relations, before that of AFRICOM and the United States of America, where he lives and whose interest he now represents on the Illuminati-controlled CFR. The bottom line is that the time for tom-toms is over. The time for beating drums and sounding a bengs is long gone. If we do not act now, if we do not fight back now, we will be presiding over the new enslavement of 4 or 5 generations to come. Frederick Douglass tells us, power does not concede without a demand, and demands must be targeted, matched by ultimatums and action. I have started a petition which is now circulating on the social media and will soon be in every nook and cranny of Jamaica and Africa. And I want you who are listening, who are just as indignant as I am, who are mad and sick and tired of being mad, to visit my Facebook page, Kabu, Maat, Kheru, Williams, and the Running African page, Running African, the IRFM Forum, and sign the petition if you haven't done so. The petition is calling on the Prime Minister of Jamaica to declare the mandate of the representative of Jamaica to the Africa Union. This is a call to action. What can you do? And sometimes we ask ourselves that questions, and we say, what can we do? And when the program is finished or we've finished our conversation, we say, what can we do? Well, we can start by signing this petition. It's the first place to start, and we just need enough signatures to get a response on this. So sign the petition and let us take it one step further. Prime Minister of Jamaica, declare the mandate of the representative, Jamaica's representative to the Africa Union. Is there a conflict of interest? Talk to the people. This is a call to action. What can you do? Start by signing the petition. But make sure that you ask the questions yourselves, in your spaces, in the political spaces, in the tribal spaces, in Gordon House, in your churches. Claim no easy victories. That's the bottom line. Claim no easy victories. This is all we say goodbye for today. African without apology. We will not get over it. We will not get over it until we've figured out what happened and figured out a way to prevent it from happening again. This is where we say goodbye. We make way for the big A inside of a Sunday sunshine. Thanks to my broadcast assistant, Karen Cole, telephone operator, Simone Brown Keys. To all of you who called, to my very special guest, Professor Oberte Shaka and his lovely wife, Pamela T. Shaka. Also to Feroze Manji, who we weren't able to get back to, but to all those who participated in the program, to Tyrone Napier, Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining.
Hide nothing from the masses of the people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, failures. Claim no easy victory. When we lose our African connection, we lose our world connection. When we disconnect ourselves from Africa, we cease to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people, begging for the entry into somebody else's house.